Welcome back to Paranormal M, everyone. I'm glad you're here. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel, and if these stories help you relax or fall asleep, you can share them with friends who have trouble sleeping too. Tonight's first story is about the Phi Ja Claw, a ghost cat from Thai folklore. People believed it could look like an ordinary cat, but there was something unnatural about it. Stories like this are interesting because they turn something familiar into something a little uncomfortable. So lie back, take it easy, and let's start. I hope you sleep well tonight. Let me tell you about one of the stranger spirits whispered about in Thai folklore. It is not the kind of ghost that floats through a doorway in white cloth or cries beside a lonely road. No, this one is quieter than that. Smaller, easier to overlook. People call it Phi Ja Claw. In some southern villages, older folks have another name for it, Phi Luan. And what makes this spirit so unsettling is that, at first glance, you might not think it is a spirit at all. You might only see a cat. Just a cat. Maybe it is sitting near the edge of the yard after sunset. Maybe it slips across the path in front of you without making a sound. Maybe it watches from beneath an old wooden house where the shadows are thick and the earth smells damp. But the stories say that if you look closely, you will know something is wrong. Its fur is black, but not the soft, shining black of a healthy animal. It is dull and rough, almost lifeless. Some say the fur grows the wrong way, pointing forward toward the head instead of back toward the tail, making the creature look swollen and unnatural. And then there are the eyes. The old storytellers describe them as deep red, glowing faintly in the dark, like fresh blood caught in moonlight. The Phi Ja Claw is said to move with frightening speed. It prowls mostly at night, and during the day it hides underground, in holes, burrows, or hollow spaces beneath the soil. If someone spots it while the sun is still up, it will not stay to be stared at. It bolts away and vanishes into the earth before anyone can get close. People believe this ghost cat hated humans. Some traditions say it was not born naturally at all, but created through dark magic. A sorcerer, someone skilled in curses and hidden rituals, could make such a creature and keep it as a servant. When the sorcerer wanted revenge, the ghost cat would be sent out in the night. And once it found its victim, the trouble could begin. Illness, madness, sudden weakness, even death, if the stories are to be believed. But there is another version too. In that telling, the Phi Ja Claw begins as an ordinary cat. Then, little by little, something changes inside it. It develops a hunger for raw flesh and blood. That hunger draws wicked spirits near, spirits known in Thai belief as prai. And once those spirits enter the animal, the cat is no longer only a cat. It becomes something cursed. What makes this legend especially interesting is that the Phi Ja Claw was not only spoken about in village stories. There are old references to beings called Ja Claw in ancient Siamese law, including records from the Three Seals law of the early Rattanakosin period. One strange legal idea said that if a person being accused in court could prove the accuser was one of these supernatural beings, the case could be dismissed. Now, whether people took that literally or symbolically, it tells us something important. Belief in these spirits was not just entertainment. It lived inside the way people understood danger, justice, illness, and fear. The Phi Ja Claw is sometimes compared to Japan's Nekomata, another supernatural cat from folklore. But the Thai ghost cat feels darker in a different way. It does not need to transform into a person. It does not need to speak. It remains in the shape of a cat, and that is what makes it so disturbing. Because cats are familiar to us. They sleep beside our homes. They wander through kitchens. They curl up in doorways and stare at things we cannot see. And maybe that is why this legend lasts. The fear is not only that a monster might come from the forest, it is that something ordinary, something we trust, might be hiding a curse beneath its skin. Today, fewer people truly believe in the Jaki the way they once did, but the name still appears in folklore collections and ghost stories, lingering like a scratch on an old wooden door. And somewhere, in a quiet village after midnight, when a black cat slips under the floorboards and its eyes catch the light just wrong, someone may still remember the warning. Do not follow it. Do not touch it. And whatever you do not let it know you are afraid. I'd had a little to drink that night. Not enough to be completely gone or anything, just enough to feel loose and tired. I was watching YouTube, and I ended up on one of those videos about disturbing documentaries. One of the documentaries they talked about was about sleep paralysis. Now, I don't have some long history with sleep paralysis, but when I was younger, I did see things sometimes. Shadows, people, animals, things that no one else ever saw. So I'm willing to admit that maybe it was just a kid's imagination, or that thing where you think you saw something and your brain fills in the rest. But there are a few things I still can't explain. A few years ago, I moved into a 3-bedroom townhouse. I moved out almost a year ago, but not because of what happened there. Honestly, it was because the rent got ridiculous. The layout was a little strange. There was 1 bedroom downstairs, along with the living room, kitchen, and a bathroom. Then there were 2 bedrooms upstairs and another bathroom. I stayed in the downstairs bedroom. The first month was normal. Just moving in, unpacking, getting my room set up. My roommates lived upstairs with their little boy, and his room was right above mine, so there was a lot of running and jumping. Because of that, I slept with a small fan on for noise. I still sleep with one now. Then one night, I woke up with this strong feeling that someone was in my room. My eyes immediately started filling with tears, but it wasn't like I was crying. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel like I was about to break down. My eyes were just watering like my body knew something before I did. Then I felt hair brushing against my upper back. I sleep without clothes, so my back was uncovered. I tried to move, but I couldn't. Not even a little. I pushed with everything I had, but my body wouldn't listen. And then I saw hair in front of me. My room wasn't pitch black because there was a streetlight outside that gave the whole space this dim glow. I usually liked that. But that night, it let me see just enough. It looked like someone with long hair was leaning over me. I remember breathing carefully, staring at those strands of hair hanging into my view. I don't know how long it lasted. It felt like forever, but realistically it was probably only a minute or two. Then, suddenly, it was gone. I could move again. I jumped up and turned on every light in the room. I checked the closet. I checked the corners. I even lifted up my king-size bed to see if somehow someone was under it. Of course, there was nothing there. I left the lights on, turned on the TV, and put on some dubbed Korean drama on Netflix because I didn't have my contacts in and couldn't read subtitles. Eventually, I fell back asleep. The next morning, I told myself it was stress. Too many horror movies. Too much imagination. Just my brain acting weird. A couple weeks later, my friend Lacey stayed over. I woke up in the middle of the night because I thought I heard her getting up to use the bathroom. But when I opened my eyes, she was still asleep beside me. She had been drinking a bit that night, but I hadn't. Her back was turned to me, and she was completely out. Then my eyes started watering again. That same strange feeling came over me. Not fear exactly, but something close to it. Something cold and warning. This time, it felt like I was being pressed down. Not held exactly. More like there was a weight on me, pinning me in place so I couldn't move. When I was a kid, certain ghost stories would make my eyes water for no reason. I never understood it. This felt exactly like that. Then I felt breathing, right against me. And again, I saw the hair. Long hair. Not jet black, but definitely dark. Not blonde, not white. Just this curtain of hair hanging near my face like someone was bending over me. It lasted long enough for me to feel trapped inside my own body. Then it stopped. The second I could move, I turned on the light and checked the room again. Nothing. Lacey barely stirred. A few minutes later, she woke up groggily and went to the bathroom, like nothing in the world had happened. Again, I tried to explain it away. Bad sleep. A weird dream. Imagination with its little claws in the dark. A couple days later, I was talking with my roommates, and I joked that the townhouse was haunted. One of them went quiet. Then she looked at me and asked, "Did you see the woman?" I swear every part of me tightened up. I asked her what she meant, and she said she thought she had seen a woman a few times near the stairs. Like someone walking down from upstairs, except no one was there. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. I told her, maybe it's the woman living in the attic. That was the wrong joke to make, because after that, she insisted on putting locks on the attic door. The strange part is, after those locks went on, I never had another visit. We all moved out about a year ago. Like I said, it was really because the rent got too high and my roommates wanted a place with a backyard. But all of us agreed on one thing before we left. Sometimes, out of nowhere, you could smell freshly smoked cigarettes in that townhouse. None of us smoked. Nothing like that has happened in my new place. But I'll be honest with you. While I'm telling this story, my eyes are starting to water again. I'm not going to use any specific religious words here. So for places people usually call a church, mosque, temple, or shrine, I'll just call them God's home. You know, as humans, we often ask God for something. Whenever we pass by God's home, we lower our heads, whisper a prayer, and ask for a blessing, a wish, or sometimes even a miracle. There was once a family of 4 who had struggled with poverty for many years. They had a small roof over their heads, but most days, even putting food on the table was difficult. The mother sold vegetables in the market, and the father worked at construction sites whenever someone hired him. They had 2 daughters, sweet and bright girls, but in many parts of Asia, people still believe a family is not complete without a son. And that thought lived inside this family, like a shadow. Even though they could barely afford school supplies for their daughters, they kept wishing for a son. They prayed again and again. They offered small things at God's home, almost like they were trying to bargain with God. But nothing changed. Then one day, a distant relative passed away and left them a piece of land in his will. The family sold that land, and with the money, they slowly improved their life. They started eating better. The girls had proper clothes and school things. For the first time in years, the house felt lighter. But as their money grew, their promises to God grew too. It became a habit. Whenever they passed God's home, they asked for a son. They even taught their daughters to pray for a baby brother. If they traveled to another town and saw another God's home, they would stop and make the same wish again. Sometimes they promised donations. Sometimes they promised offerings. They didn't really understand what they were doing or how many promises they were making. After some time, the wife became pregnant. This time they visited even more God's homes. Their prayers became stronger, their promises bigger. And then, the child was born. It was a boy. They named him Ariv. The family was overjoyed. They felt like their biggest wish had finally come true. They donated at some of the places they remembered, trying to keep their promises. But soon, something began to feel wrong. Ari was always sick. Not just once in a while, almost all the time. Some weeks he would get better, then suddenly fall ill again. They took him to doctors. They did tests. They bought medicines. But every report looked normal, and still, the boy kept suffering. 2 or 3 years passed like that. His health kept going down, and the family became desperate. They started thinking maybe someone was jealous of them. After all, their life had changed quickly. They had received money, their condition had improved, and then they had a son. Maybe, they thought, someone had cursed them. So one day, someone suggested they visit a medium. The parents went, hoping for an answer. The medium listened quietly and then said, "He is waiting for you to fulfill your promises." The father asked, "Who is waiting?" And the medium said, "God." The parents froze. The medium explained, "You asked at too many God's homes for a son. One of them blessed you. But now that God is waiting for you to keep the promise you made there, He gave you what you asked for, but you forgot what you promised in return." The mother began crying because they had made so many promises in so many places. They had even taught their daughters to ask for a brother. How could they know which God's home had answered them? The medium said, "He is angry. Your son's health is suffering because of that anger. The one who gives can also take away." The family was terrified. After that, they began praying with a different heart, not asking for more, not bargaining, not offering things like a trade. They asked for forgiveness. They admitted they had been careless with their promises. For nearly a month, they prayed, visited the places they remembered, and did what they could to make things right. And then, slowly, Ariv's health began to improve. The fever stopped coming back. His body became stronger. His face looked alive again. Within a short time, he was running around the house like he had never been sick at all. And from that day on, the family never treated prayer like a bargain again. Have you ever walked past an old theater and felt, just for a second, that someone inside was watching you? That's the feeling people still talk about when they remember Eastgate Cinema in Wan Chai. It opened in the mid-1960s, right around the corner of 2 busy streets, and at first, it looked like pure glamour. There was a polished stone lobby, soft, artistic lighting, and more than 1,000 seats waiting in the dark. People came from all over Hong Kong to watch films there. Tourists came too. From the outside, it was just another beautiful cinema. But the land had a different memory. Before the theater was built, the site had been a funeral parlor. For years, families had gone there to say goodbye to the dead. Then the funeral home moved away, the building was torn down, and the cinema rose in its place. And maybe that should have been the end of it. But according to the stories, it wasn't. Not long after Eastgate Cinema opened, strange things started happening. Staff whispered about cold spots in the hallways. Some customers said they felt uneasy the moment they stepped inside, like the darkness in the theater was a little too heavy. The most famous story was about a woman who went into the ladies' restroom during a movie. She stood at the mirror, fixing herself up, when she noticed someone behind her. A woman with long black hair was slowly combing it. At first, she thought it was just another customer. But when she looked more closely, she froze. The woman in the mirror had no face, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just smooth, pale skin where a face should have been. The customer ran out shaking. In some versions of the story, it gets even worse. They say when she left the cubicle, she saw a headless woman standing at the sink, calmly combing the hair on her own severed head. People later claimed that part of the restroom had been built near where the old mortuary once stood. Whether that's true or not, it made the story harder to forget. Then there was the night of the impossible full house. One usher said the cinema had been nearly empty when the film began. Only a few people had bought tickets. But halfway through the screening, he looked across the room and saw every seat filled. Not with ordinary customers, with pale, silent figures. They sat stiffly in the dark, moving their hands in strange little motions, almost like they were performing some kind of ritual. The usher was too frightened to speak, but when the lights came on after the movie, the room was almost empty again. Only the real customers remained. Everyone else had vanished. After that, some workers refused to take late shifts. A few reportedly quit altogether. And from then on, when people said a cinema had a full house, the phrase carried a colder meaning. There was another story, too, about the rear stairwell. A man had stepped out during a movie to smoke. As he stood there in the dim light, he felt a tap on his shoulder. A voice said, very politely, "Brother, can I borrow a light?" He turned and saw a man standing behind him. His face was gray and sunken, his eyes dark and hollow. Still, the smoker handed him the lighter. The stranger lit his cigarette, said thank you, and then simply disappeared into the shadows. After that, people said the stairwell never felt empty. Even when no one was there, you had the feeling someone was standing just behind you. Other stories gathered around the cinema over the years, faces appearing in mirrors, old men lying beneath the seats, tickets that suddenly felt thin and brittle, like funeral paper. Maybe some of it came from tired eyes, flickering lights, and nervous imaginations. Cinemas are strange places after all. You sit in the dark with strangers, staring at ghosts made of light. But Eastgate had something more. It had a past people couldn't quite bury. The cinema eventually closed in the 1970s. The building was torn down, and a modern office tower took its place. Today, if you pass by, you won't see the old lobby, the rows of seats, or the shadowy staircase. But stories don't need buildings to survive. They live in the telling. And that's why people still remember Eastgate Cinema. Not just as a place where movies once played, but as a place where the past seemed to sit quietly among the living, waiting for the lights to go out. I was driving back from Texas headed toward Mississippi when I decided to pull off near Poverty Point in Louisiana. The sun was already sinking, and honestly, I almost kept driving. But I'd heard about the place before, and something in me thought, just go, stretch your legs, see it for yourself. So I did. When I got there, the park was closed. No people, no noise, just fields, low fog, and this huge old mound rising out of the ground, like it had been waiting there forever. I walked up the trail, and at first it felt peaceful, beautiful even. The sky was fading orange and purple, and the mist was hanging close to the grass. It felt ancient. Then I noticed a car pull in behind mine. A man got out and looked around my truck. I figured maybe it was a ranger. Maybe I wasn't supposed to be there. But I was already too far along the path, so I kept going. I made it to the top of the mound and stayed there a while, just watching the last light disappear. At one point, I shouted, "Hello," just to hear the echo, and it carried way farther than I expected. Then the woods changed. The insects got louder all at once. Not gradually. It was like someone turned up the volume on the whole place. Then something started howling from the trees below. It sounded almost like a dog at first, then longer, deeper, stranger. I stood there listening until it stopped, and when it did, the whole area went quiet again. That should have been enough for me to leave fast, but I started walking back through the field. I kept hearing something in the woods. When I walked, it moved. When I stopped, it stopped. I told myself it was an armadillo or some animal, because that was easier than thinking about anything else. Then, when I was maybe 40 yards from my truck, another car came down the road. That's when I saw it. At first, it was just a small, dark shape in the fog. I thought maybe it was an armadillo. Then it got bigger. Maybe a dog. Then bigger again. It was running beside the road, chasing the car. For a few seconds, it looked like it stood upright. Its arms were down at its sides, and it moved on two legs in this stiff, unnatural way. My brain kept trying to explain it. A person? A ranger messing with me? Some animal caught in the headlights? Then it dropped forward and ran on all fours. It was fast. Too fast. Long-limbed, gray-brown, with a tail, but not like any animal I could name. Another car came up behind it, and the headlights hit it just enough for me to see the body before it disappeared into the dark. I just stood there. I couldn't make sense of it. It was like my mind kept flipping through pictures. Dog, panther, monkey, coyote, person. None of them fit. I called my cousin and said, "Stay on the phone with me. I'm not crazy, but I need you to talk to me until I get to my car." Those last few steps felt endless. When the truck lights flashed as I unlocked it, I have never felt so relieved in my life. I got in, locked the doors, and just sat there trying to explain what I'd seen. I still don't know what it was. Later, I looked up local legends. Some things sounded close. Rougarou, Dogman, shapeshifter stories. Even some older native stories people connect to places like that. But I'm not saying I know what I saw. I'm only saying this. Something crossed that field in front of me that night, and it didn't move like anything I've ever seen in the real world. I grew up in a small village in South Gujarat, India, and honestly, people from rural places will probably understand what I mean right away. In my village, things like black magic, ghosts, spirits, and curses were never treated like stories made up to scare children. They were part of life. People spoke about them carefully, sometimes quietly, but nobody laughed them off. Even after I started studying abroad during my teenage years, most of the people around me, whether relatives, family friends, or classmates from similar backgrounds, still understood that these things were not something to mock. So when I first met people who genuinely did not believe in ghosts, witches, or black magic, it surprised me more than I can explain. I was still quite young then, and even now, it feels strange to me. I am not saying this because I want to force anyone to believe what I believe. I learned early that you cannot push belief into someone's hands and expect them to hold it. Some people will reject anything that does not fit their worldview, no matter what they see or hear. You could show someone the clearest truth in front of them, and if they have already decided not to accept it, they simply will not. But what worries me is how many people get hurt because they refuse to even consider that they might be wrong. Back home, black magic is taken seriously. When something like that happens, people usually recognize it quickly and try to deal with it. Not always perfectly, of course, but at least they do not ignore it until it is too late. Most of the time, the person affected survives because the family acts fast. But while studying in New Zealand, I saw two situations that shook me deeply. The first was a relative named Nilesh. I had attended his wedding, and I remember him as a kind man, maybe a little too trusting, but not a bad person at all. He did not believe in ghosts or black magic. A few years later, another relative admitted that she had done black magic on him. Shortly after his wedding, he suddenly became very sick with what seemed like the flu. He had been healthy before that, A young man in his early 30s, full of life, and then within days, he was gone. People can call it coincidence if they want. I understand that. But for those of us who knew the details, it did not feel natural. The second person was a family friend named Rohan. He called himself a secular humanist, and he was very firm about not believing in God, spirits, or anything beyond what he could explain. I always felt he was too dismissive, not because he asked questions, but because he refused to respect even the possibility that something could exist outside his understanding. One day, his mother was given food by a woman she barely knew. There were concerns that something had been done to it, but Rohan ate it anyway because he wanted to prove that black magic was nonsense. A few days later, he became severely ill. A spiritual practitioner in India was contacted, and interestingly, he did not say to avoid doctors. He actually told the family that Rohan needed to go to the hospital as part of the treatment. But Rohan refused for several days, partly because he did not want to follow advice that came from someone connected to the paranormal. By the time he finally went, his condition had become very serious. He slipped into a coma and passed away soon after. The cause was never clearly explained. I know some people listening to this may not believe any of it. Maybe you grew up in a place where disbelief felt safe, where the paranormal was treated like entertainment or superstition. I understand that your life may have taught you something different. But from where I come from, ignoring these things can be dangerous. Questioning is fine. I actually think it is healthy to question. But refusing to look at evidence, inventing explanations just to avoid discomfort, or mocking people who have experienced these things is not wisdom. It is pride dressed up as logic. When life is normal, it is easy to say, "I don't believe in any of that." It is easy to laugh when nothing is happening to you. But if one day you feel deep down that something is wrong, if you are experiencing hauntings, strange disturbances, or signs of black magic, please do not ignore it just to protect your pride. Speak to someone trusted, not a random person online, not someone who wants to scare you or take advantage of you, but a known and respected expert. A genuine person will not tell you to reject medical or psychological help. In fact, many of them will encourage it if they think it is needed. Real help should protect you from every side. Now that I am older, I am trying to understand people who do not believe. I am trying to have more patience and sympathy because I know everyone comes from a different life and different experiences. But I also feel strongly that awareness matters, especially about black magic. I do not have a full plan yet, but I know I want to do something. Even if it only helps a few people take these things more seriously before it is too late, that would matter to me. So my wife and I drove about 4.5 hours from Maryland to visit this old asylum I've been wanting to see for years. Ever since I was a teenager and watched a paranormal special film there, I got completely pulled into the history of Kirkbride buildings. I mean, fully pulled in. The architecture, the stories, the atmosphere, all of it just stayed with me. We got there yesterday and basically went straight to the asylum. We had a guided paranormal tour scheduled for later that night, around 9:30, so we decided to do the daytime historical tours first. Our first guide was Maddie, and she took us through the North Wing. A lot of people had recommended that tour because the night tour doesn't go through that section. It ended up just being my wife, me, and the guide, which made everything feel more personal and honestly, a little more intense. During the daytime historical tours, they're not supposed to talk about paranormal activity. If something strange happens and there's any possible normal explanation, they're expected to explain it away. Maintenance, another tour, someone nearby, things like that. The North Wing used to house some of the more difficult patients, including people moved from the forensic building. There were also recovery rooms connected to lobotomy procedures, including one area for documented surgeries and another tied to more experimental procedures. We were allowed to walk around some of those recovery rooms for a bit. At one point, my wife and I were in one of the side rooms, and I knocked that little shave and a haircut rhythm on the wall and asked if anyone there could finish it. Nothing happened right away, but later, as we were walking outside to look at the exterior part of the campus, we heard 2 loud bangs on a window from the recovery ward. Not soft taps, loud bangs. That part of the building wasn't even restored enough for visitors to safely enter. Maddie looked startled for just a second, then told us another guide sometimes liked to mess with her if he saw her outside. But from what we understood, nobody was supposed to be in that wing except the owner or maintenance and security staff. That was the first moment where I thought, okay, that was odd. Our second tour that day was with Jessa. It was about 90 minutes and covered all the floors of the main building, plus part of the medical center. Nothing huge happened on that one, but a few rooms really affected me physically. The seclusion rooms in the aggressive women's ward gave me this sudden sharp headache and a wave of nausea that felt very unlike me. The strangest moment happened on the 4th floor, near the area that leads up toward the clock tower. The whole group heard a whistle come from down one of the hallways. I didn't say anything at first, but another woman asked if anyone else had heard it. Jessa just gave this knowing little smile and didn't comment. I also kept smelling cigarette smoke throughout the main building that morning, especially near the front lobby by the restored ward. It would come and go, but it was strong enough that I kept noticing it. Later that night, we came back for the guided paranormal tour. I'm pretty sure our guide's name was Jake, and he knew that place incredibly well. What I appreciated most was that he seemed naturally skeptical. He wasn't trying to make everything spooky. That actually made the strange things feel more believable. Across the whole tour, I kept feeling lightheaded in certain places. There was also this pressure in the air sometimes, almost like tension before a storm. I had headaches, ear pain, and even some eye pain in different spots. On the 1st floor, in the restored admissions wing that later became a geriatric unit, my wife suddenly smelled something awful in a room away from the group. She said it was like sour body odor mixed with rot, and that it burned her nose. Then it vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. A little later, we rounded a corner into what used to be a nurse's station. While we were standing quietly and listening to Jake talk, we heard what sounded like someone speaking nonsense words, almost like an adult imitating a toddler. There was also a faint sound underneath it, like a TV or radio playing in another room. That one genuinely scared me. It didn't feel playful. It felt strange in a way I still don't really know how to explain. On the 2nd floor, which had also been used for geriatric overflow, certain rooms smelled strongly of fresh urine. I know that sounds unpleasant to mention, but I used to work in elder care, and I know that smell. This wasn't old building smell. It smelled fresh, and I'm almost positive no one had used a restroom anywhere near that room. The 3rd floor had a completely different feeling. There are said to be 2 former residents, Frankie and Lenny, who were close friends when they lived there. Their room has 2 closets and a table in the middle with playing cards, cigarettes, money, photographs, magazines, and other little offerings people have left behind. The first time we went into that room, all 6 of us heard what sounded like furniture being dragged in a room down the hall. The second time we went in, my wife touched the table, and immediately there was this loud clicking or clinking sound from the closets. We found out the next day that people often associate that sound with Frankie and Lenny wanting to play cards. That room actually felt lighter than the rest of the building, almost like a break room in the middle of all that heaviness. The 4th floor was the one that stuck with me the most. My wife and I both saw this strange shadow shape near a window at the end of a hallway. It moved in this wavy, almost snake-like way, dipping in and out of view. My first instinct was to turn around. It was like my brain said, "You are not supposed to be seeing this." But my wife kept staring at it. Later, she told me she felt suddenly angry for no reason and almost compelled to keep watching it. She was actually upset when the guide moved us along. Once we got off that floor, the feeling faded for both of us. I also smelled burning wood as soon as we got onto that floor, which was strange because it didn't seem to be coming from anywhere obvious. We came back today for the daytime paranormal tour. Not as much happened, but there were still a few things I can't shake. In the aggressive women's ward, we kept smelling perfume. Strong, old-fashioned perfume, almost like something from an Avon bottle. It didn't seem like it was coming from anyone in our group. At one point, it smelled like someone had sprayed it directly in front of my face. Later, I stepped out of a small room, walked into the next one, then crossed the hall and stood near an old whiteboard and a fire extinguisher while waiting for my wife. I was looking through a doorway at the end of the hall when I saw a figure move from right to left in maybe 3 strides. It didn't feel negative. It actually felt more like a staff member rushing somewhere than a resident spirit. Just quick, purposeful, and gone. Our guide for that tour was Kylie. Her father works as a paranormal investigator at the asylum, and she showed us several photos people had captured there. Some of the shadow figures looked incredibly human, with shapes that seemed to show clothing and posture. She also showed us a photo of a wet human footprint found on the 4th floor, and it appeared to have 6 toes. There was also a video from the medical building where a guest heard a terrible scream in the room with him. He panicked immediately and wanted out. Honestly, after hearing the video, I don't blame him at all. That scream was awful. I would have left too. By the end of the trip, I just kept thinking, this place is real. Maybe not every single thing has a paranormal explanation, and I'm okay with that. But there were too many moments, too many small things stacked together to just brush it all off. We're already planning to go back, probably for an overnight investigation later in the summer or early fall. I don't know exactly what's in that building, but something is there. And if you spend enough time inside, I really do think something will make itself known. I'm the oldest child in my family, and I'm 20 now. My younger brother Ryan was born in 2009, so he's 16. Before he came along, though, my mom went through a really painful stretch. Around 2008 and early 2009, she had several pregnancies that didn't make it. Some were miscarriages, and some were medical emergencies tied to complications with her blood type. She's A negative, my dad is O positive, and because she was still pretty young and things got complicated, most of those pregnancies ended early. But the one right before Ryan was different. That baby was a boy, and my mom lost him around the 7th month. She saw him after he was delivered. He was still, and I don't think that image ever really left her. Not long after that, she had my brother. And as we grew up, she would tell us something I never knew how to process. She said sometimes she could see that baby or hear him crying. She said it happened so strongly at times that she would start lactating, even though she knew it wasn't Ryan crying. And this didn't just happen once or twice. It carried on through my brother's childhood. Now that we're older, she still talks about him. She says whenever she starts to forget him, even a little, he shows up again. And the thing is, I'm not particularly religious. I'm not someone who jumps to spiritual explanations. Neither is my brother. But we've both had moments in this house where we felt something. Lately, I've even started seeing him too. Not clearly. Not like someone standing in front of me having a conversation. It's more like a tall, thin figure passing through the edge of my vision, wandering through the house like he lives here too. My mom has this theory that he feels left out. Whenever she buys something for Ryan out of love, or whenever our family is happy and laughing together, she thinks he gets upset. Not angry exactly, more like he wants to be included. We live right under the terrace, and in the evenings, we sometimes hear what sounds like someone running around up there. Sometimes it sounds like a ball bouncing. The strange part is that one of our neighbors once told my mom he saw her kid playing with a ball on the terrace. The ball had rolled over to his side, since our terraces are on the same level and right next to each other, so he returned it. But Rianne hadn't played on the terrace in years. A few days ago, my mom said she was in her room and heard someone tossing a ball in the hallway outside her bedroom, over and over again. Throwing it, chasing it, throwing it again. She checked, and it wasn't Rianne. He was asleep. There was another time that still sticks with me. It was summer break, late at night, probably around 2 in the morning. Rianne and I were in the living room watching movies. We were laughing a lot, getting along better than usual, just having one of those rare sibling nights where everything feels easy. At some point, I put my earbud case on the sofa. Rianne saw me put it there. Then, seconds later, it was gone. And for some reason, we both got really unsettled. Our house is old and cluttered, so losing something small shouldn't have been a big deal. But this felt different. We searched everywhere. We tore through cushions, checked under furniture, looked in rooms we hadn't even gone into. Eventually, our parents got involved too. Nothing. After hours of searching, we gave up and went back toward the living room. And there it was. The case was sitting neatly on the sofa, right where anyone could see it, directly in the line of sight from the doorway. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't wedged between cushions. It was placed there plainly, almost carefully. Rianne and I didn't even have to say it. We just knew. This summer, I'm back from college, and our family has been planning a big trip. So there's been a lot of family time, a lot of shopping, a lot of excitement. My parents have been buying things for both me and Rianne, and according to my mom's theory, that's exactly the kind of thing that makes him show up. And sure enough, I've been seeing that lanky figure around the house again. The strange thing is, I'm never scared. My mom says she isn't scared either when she sees him. She says he doesn't mean harm. But she also believes he gets jealous sometimes, especially when everyone dotes on Rianne. And honestly, we do. Everyone loves Rianne. He's the youngest, and he gets a lot of affection. Sometimes, after days when he's been especially spoiled or fussed over, Rianne will suddenly feel sick. Just a little fever, a little weakness, nothing serious. By morning, he's usually fine. My mom says it's because the child feels jealous of him. So yeah, I joke sometimes that it's basically middle child syndrome from beyond the veil. But I still wonder about it. Is this normal? Do ghosts grow up with the family they never got to join? A few years back, I went with my then-girlfriend and a couple of her friends to do the Waverly Hills Sanatorium tour. It was for one of their birthdays, and I'll be honest with you, I've always been skeptical about paranormal stuff. Not closed off to it exactly. I actually want to believe there's something more out there. I just don't usually accept things unless I've seen them myself. My brain always tries to find the reasonable explanation first, before letting me jump to anything supernatural. So we get there, and the guides are doing their usual talks. You can tell some of it is probably something they've said 1,000 times before, but even so, the place has a heavy feeling to it. It's creepy in a way that gets under your skin. Even if you don't believe in ghosts, the history alone is enough to make the whole building feel charged. We moved through different parts of the facility, and our guide showed us some strange photos that had supposedly been taken in the rooms we were standing in. He also took us down near the tunnel they used back then, and honestly, the whole tour was really interesting. I learned a lot. But at that point, I still felt like most of it was probably just part of the experience. A haunted tourist attraction, you know? Creepy, well done, but still a show. Eventually, we got to the dorm and kitchen area. The guide started telling us about the hauntings people had reported there. The dorm rooms were small, maybe around 12 feet across, with old door frames instead of actual doors. On one side, there was a balcony area. On the other side was the hallway where our group was standing. Then the guide said he wanted to try something with shadow figures, or shadow people. Personally, I've always thought that kind of thing could be your brain playing tricks on you in the right lighting. And the fact that he wanted everyone to stand in one very specific place made me even more suspicious. He started calling people up one at a time, and while everyone else was focused on that, I just began looking around the building. That's when I looked through the doorway right beside me. Across the room, on the far side, I saw a man standing there. I couldn't make out his face clearly. It was too dark. But there was this faint bluish light around him. I still don't know if it came from him, or if maybe there was some emergency light nearby that I didn't notice. He looked about 5'9". He had shoulder-length white hair, a white shirt, a faded denim jacket, denim pants, and a bit of a belly. He was just standing there, looking in our direction. We stared at each other for what felt like forever, but it was probably only 15 seconds. And here's the thing that bothered me right away. From where he was standing, he wouldn't have been able to see whatever shadow experiment the guide was doing. So whether he was a real person or something else, it was deeply unsettling. Just this man standing completely still across a supposedly haunted dorm room, watching in silence. Then he turned and slowly started walking away. The second his face passed behind the wall, I moved. I practically jumped through that dorm room. One step in the middle, then straight to the other doorway, looking in the direction he'd gone. There was no one there. My first thought was that maybe he ducked into another dorm room nearby, but he would have had to move fast. Really fast. And when I checked, there was no sign of him anywhere. That alone would have been strange enough, and honestly, it stuck with me. But the part that really made me question everything happened after we got home. We were exhausted, but we still had to take care of the dog and the cat. Both of them came right up to greet us when we walked in, so we knew exactly where they were. We sat down in the living room for a minute, just trying to settle back in. Then a ball came flying out of my office and rolled into the living room. Both animals were sitting with us. I went into the office and checked it the same way I had checked those dorm rooms. Nothing. Nobody there. Nothing out of place that explained it. That happened about 4 years ago, and I still think about it. I'm not saying I have every answer. I don't. But I do believe we ran into something that night. And one last thing. After I saw that man, I started paying close attention to everyone in our group and all the workers whenever we got into brighter, more open areas. I looked hard. Not one person there had that white shoulder-length hair. Not one person was dressed like him. Last night, I was on the phone with my friend Marius, and somehow we ended up deep in a conversation about Gnosticism. He is Christian, but not in the way where he takes every single thing in the Bible as literal law. He sees a lot of it as symbolic, almost like a map written in metaphor. So when I bring up different beliefs, different religions, spiritual ideas, or teachings I've been studying, he actually listens. He may not agree with everything, but he stays open. I started telling him about the demiurge, the archons, and the whole idea behind Gnosticism. I'm still learning, so I know I might not explain everything perfectly, but I was trying to talk through what I understood. I kept coming back to the demiurge, this ignorant creator figure who made this world and keeps souls trapped here, feeding off our emotions, our pain, our fear, our energy. I don't even know if I have the right words for it, but that was the feeling I was trying to describe. Then the conversation drifted into this heavier place. We started talking about how, honestly, we both kind of hope none of these religions are actually true. He asked me, what if there are other worlds out there? Other planets with beings like us, or even more advanced than us? And I said, they're probably doing the same thing we are, making stories, creating gods, building religions, trying to explain why they're here. That thought made both of us feel tired in a strange way. Like, what if every conscious being everywhere is stuck asking the same impossible questions? Then Marius just kind of threw his hands up and said, I don't want that. I really don't want that. And I understood him completely. We both said it might be easier if, after death, there was just nothing, just darkness, no judgment, no God, no demiurge, no endless spiritual puzzle to solve. You live, you do what you choose to do, and then it is over. If you want to be kind, you be kind. If you do not care, that is still your choice. No cosmic scoreboard, no one fighting over who had the truth. I hope that makes sense. I know it sounds messy when I say it out loud, but that is honestly where my mind was. During the conversation, I kept talking about the demiurge almost like I was challenging him. I called him ignorant. I called him flawed. I said humans are a reflection of that same energy. Jealous, emotional, prideful, selfish, wounded. And if people believe we were made in his image, then it feels strange to worship something that carries the same brokenness we do. To me, the real higher power has to be somewhere inside us. That is one thing I keep coming back to with Gnosticism. The idea that there is a spark in us, some kind of inner light. Maybe we are supposed to remember that. Maybe we are supposed to become connected, like one collective consciousness. But in this world, in this realm, it feels almost impossible. This place feels too divided, too heavy, too built on confusion. Eventually, we ended the call by saying, let's just hope there is nothing after this. No demiurge, no trap, no spiritual war. Just peace. Then we hung up. I went to bed not long after. My back had been hurting, so I had a warm heating pad tucked against it. I was lying on my stomach, holding my stuffed bear close, and I fell asleep pretty fast because I was exhausted. Sometimes, right after I close my eyes, I get this short little dream before I actually fall into a deeper sleep. It usually happens within the first 20 minutes. I'll dream, wake up for a second, and then go back to sleep for real. That happened again. I cannot remember what the first dream was about, but I know it was not scary. I just remember slowly waking up from it, the way I usually do. But as I was waking up, something felt wrong. It felt like sleep paralysis, but not the kind I normally experience. Usually, I cannot move at all. This time, I could move my arms. I could open my eyes. My upper body was not completely frozen, but my lower body felt stuck, almost disconnected, like it was pinned to the bed. Then I opened my eyes fully, and I saw something. There was this dark figure in my room, completely black. Not shadowy in a soft way, but deep, heavy black. I could see its eyes, though. They looked pale, almost white. I could not really make out its lower body, but the upper half looked large, especially the head. It had something hanging down from it, maybe long hair or thick strands. And it had 2 black horns. They were not huge, but they were clear enough that I knew what I was seeing. It kept jerking toward me, like it was trying to rush at me in short bursts. It would move forward, then stop, then move forward again. It felt like something was holding it back, like it wanted to get closer, but could only come so far. I was terrified. Not just scared, but shocked in a way that made everything feel unreal. My arms were kind of holding me up, but my lower body would not respond. All I could do was stare at it. I do not even know if I fully felt the fear in the moment, because the shock was louder than everything else. Then, after a little while, it was gone. I looked around my room, trying to understand what had just happened. My heart was racing. The whole room felt different, like the air had been disturbed. I started praying. I prayed to the Almighty, to the Divine, to anything truly good and higher than whatever that thing was. I rebuked it. I kept saying it over and over, telling it to leave me alone, telling it had no place near me. Then I got up and used Florida water around my space because I needed to do something physical. I needed my room to feel like mine again. After that, I was not exactly scared anymore, but I was still shaken. I kept sitting there thinking, what was that? Was it connected to what we had been talking about? Was it the demiurge? Was it something under him? Or was it just my mind pulling something from the conversation and turning it into a nightmare? I do not know. But it felt real, and even now, I keep wondering what actually came into my room that night. I think this happened in early 2023, maybe late February or March. I'm not completely sure, but I remember there was still snow and ice everywhere. My friend Marin and I decided for some ridiculous reason to go up to the hot springs in the middle of the night. It was probably close to midnight. We were not dressed for it at all. No proper boots, no traction, nothing smart. Just the two of us sliding around like newborn deer on this icy trail. We made it a couple miles in, slipping and falling the whole way, and eventually we both realized, okay, if we keep going, we're going to have to hike all the way back, soaked, freezing, and miserable. So we gave up and decided we'd come back another time. The hike back was normal at first. Nothing felt strange. Nothing felt creepy. We were cold and annoyed, but that was really it. Then we got back to the road, and the parking lot was still maybe half a mile away. The whole road had this thick sheet of ice over it, so we were walking really carefully. At one point, Marin stopped because there was this frozen waterfall along the rocks beside us, and she wanted to take a picture. She took the photo, looked at it for a second, and then got quiet. I asked her, "What?" And she said, "I don't know why, but I feel like I shouldn't have taken that." I thought that was strange, so I asked, "Why not?" She just said, "I don't know. I'm deleting it." So she deleted the picture. And right after that, we heard the ice crack beneath us 3 times. Not little cracks, not natural shifting. It sounded exactly like someone very heavy was running toward us, hitting the ice hard with each step. Like someone with a staff, pounding it into the ground. Crack, crack, crack. And then it stopped right at our feet. We were not standing on a frozen lake or anything like that. We were on a paved road with maybe 3 inches of solid ice over it. It should not have been cracking like that. Not with that kind of force. Not in that pattern. It felt intentional. We both froze. I grabbed her, she grabbed me, and for a second, neither of us moved. Then we both knew, without really needing to say it, that we had to get back to the car. So we started walking as fast as we could without wiping out. We were holding on to each other, trying not to slip, and we could hear footsteps behind us. They were moving back and forth. First one side of the road, then the other. Then they seemed to move up the hill on our right, still keeping pace with us. The worst part was this overwhelming feeling that we should not turn around. It wasn't just fear. It was more like a warning inside my body. Don't look. Don't acknowledge it too much. Just keep moving. We did say out loud that something was following us. We were praying too, just asking for protection, talking to each other enough to stay calm, but not too much. The river was down below us on the left, flowing the opposite direction from where we were walking. And then I started hearing a man's voice from that direction. It sounded like he was floating along beside us somehow, keeping pace with us from down by the water. In my mind, I kept getting this image of a man drifting on something, maybe a raft, though I have no idea why. At first, the voice was going back and forth between chuckling and crying, laughing a little, then sobbing, then laughing again. I told Marin, "I'm hearing a man's voice." She said she could still only hear the footsteps. And as soon as she said that, the voice changed. It said, "Help." Then again, louder, "Help." Then a third time, "Help." It didn't sound like someone who truly needed help. It sounded like someone pretending. Like it knew we weren't going to fall for it, so it was just trying to scare us instead. After the third time, Marin said, "I hear it now." That made it worse somehow. Finally, we could see the parking lot ahead of us. As soon as it came into view, the man's voice turned into this wild, hysterical laughter. Just laughing and laughing from down by the river. Then the footsteps up on the hill to our right stopped sounding like footsteps, and something started whispering at us. "Wait." Then louder. "Wait." Then, "Come back." The voice by the river started fading, but the thing on the hill kept calling after us. By then, there were patches where we could see the actual ground under the ice, so we stopped being careful and just ran. We got to the car, jumped in, shut the doors, and drove away. And that was it. I've been to those hot springs during the day, and honestly, they're beautiful, peaceful, quiet. The kind of place that feels almost unreal in a good way. But I don't think I'll ever go back there at night. Not even with a group. I've experienced strange things before, but that night felt different. It felt like something was playing with us, and it wanted us to know it was there. That is one place I will never whistle in the dark. I honestly don't even know where to start. Before the pandemic, my family moved into this newly built house. At first, everything felt normal. Nothing strange, nothing scary. It just felt like a fresh start. But then the pandemic happened, and suddenly I was stuck at home all the time. My sleep schedule got completely ruined. I would sleep in the morning and study at night, so most nights I was alone at the dining table, trying to focus. Our dining table had 6 chairs. One night, while I was studying, I saw something in my peripheral vision. It looked like people were sitting around the table. Not shadows, not vague shapes. People. And they were wearing barong. I tried to calm myself down. I kept thinking, "You're just tired. You need sleep. This is probably just your mind playing tricks on you." But even while I was telling myself that, I was scared. I tried to stand up, but both of my feet suddenly felt freezing cold. It was that awful feeling where you know your feet are there, but you can't move them. So I just sat back down and stayed still. After a while, I could finally feel my feet again, and the second I could move, I ran straight to the bed and stayed beside my mom. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Back then, I had this cheap Huawei phone. I don't remember the exact model, but I remember one thing clearly. When the battery got too low, maybe around 15 or 18%, it wouldn't let me use the flashlight anymore. One night, there was a brownout. My mom asked me to go to the kitchen and get the lighter. Now, our kitchen sink had black tiles around it, and you could clearly see your reflection there. So I went in, found the lighter, and when I looked at the tile near the sink, I saw someone standing behind me. It was a man. He was wearing a tuxedo. I froze. Then right at that moment, my phone's flashlight shut off because the battery was low. Everything went dark. I ran. I didn't care that I couldn't see properly. I almost tripped on the stairs, but I just kept going. And yes, I have brothers, but none of them would be wearing a tuxedo at night in that heat. Also, it definitely wasn't them. The shape, the height, everything was wrong. Another time, my nephew had just gone back to his mother's side of the family. I was actually relieved because the house was finally quiet. I was alone, and since it was still morning, I decided to clean. While I was moving one of the chairs, I saw a little boy run past me. He was laughing. Even though the chair I was holding was heavy, my eyes followed him. Then when I turned, I saw a girl sitting on the stairs. In my head, I even remember thinking, "She's pretty." Then suddenly it hit me. I was alone. There were no kids in the house. No one was supposed to be there. And the strangest part is, after I realized that, I couldn't remember what the girl looked like anymore. It was like the memory of her face just disappeared. I ended up going outside and waiting there until someone came home. There was also this one time when I was in the room I shared with my mom. I was lying on my stomach, using my phone, with my back facing the door. I heard the door creak open. Then I heard footsteps on the tile. After that, I felt someone sit on the bed. I assumed it was my mom. Usually my mom talks to me first, but that time, she was quiet. So I started talking to her. I asked, "What's for dinner?" and said a bunch of other random things. No answer. I hate being ignored, so I was about to turn around and complain. But when I looked toward the part of the bed where I felt someone sit, there was nothing there. Later, I asked my mom and everyone else if they had gone into our room. No one had. My brothers were busy doing their own things, and at that time, it was just me and my mom at home. So apparently, I had been talking to no one. My mom said maybe it was the cat jumping on the bed, but I know it wasn't. If it were my cat, she would have climbed onto my back like she always does. And cats don't wear slippers. I heard slippers on the tile. Another weekend, I woke up around 8 or maybe 10 in the morning. I thought everyone was home. Everything felt normal. I figured my mom was outside feeding the chickens or gossiping with the neighbors, and I thought my third brother was just in his room. I was boiling water near the sink, and again, because of the tiles, I could see reflections. Then I saw my brother's reflection behind me. I even prepared myself because he always liked to poke my waist, and it hurt, so I was ready to fight back. But he just ignored me and walked past. Then I heard his room door slam shut. A little later, I went to our room. Our rooms were right beside each other, separated only by a thick wall. Then I heard something hitting the wall. I could even feel the vibration from it. I thought he was kicking the wall from his side, so I kicked back. It kept annoying me, so I finally decided to go outside and confront him. But just as I was about to do that, my brother entered the house. He had just gotten a haircut. That means he hadn't been in his room at all. My mom had gone out for groceries. My first brother had gone to work. My third brother had gone to get his hair cut. So who did I see in the reflection? And who was I kicking the wall with? There are honestly so many more experiences, but after a while, it started to feel almost normal. A lot of people in my family have a history of seeing things like this. But for me, it didn't really begin when we moved into the new house. It just became harder to ignore. This happened when I was studying at a university in Lucknow. I was staying in the college hostel then, sharing a room with my roommate, Pallavi Didi. By that time, I had already been living in that same room for almost a year and a half, and honestly, nothing had ever felt strange before. It was just a normal hostel room. We studied there, laughed there, slept there, complained about mess food there. Everything was fine. But after my third semester ended, the whole feeling of the room changed. I don't know how to explain it properly, but the room started feeling cold. Not normal cold. It was this deep, uncomfortable chill, the kind that makes you feel like something is standing too close to you. Then, the sleep paralysis began. Almost every day, I would wake up, but not really wake up. My eyes would open, but my body wouldn't move at all. It felt like someone was sitting on my chest, pressing down so hard that I couldn't breathe properly. Some nights, it felt like someone was holding me from behind, tightly, like they didn't want to let me go. I couldn't move my hands. I couldn't move my legs. I couldn't even move my fingers. At first, I kept telling myself, maybe I'm stressed. Maybe it's because of exams. Maybe I'm overthinking. My roommate said the same thing. She told me not to scare myself. So, I tried to ignore it. But then the dreams started, and they were not normal dreams. In the dream, I would see myself sleeping exactly the way I was actually sleeping. Same side, same blanket, same bed, same room. Everything looked real, too real. And near my feet, there would be a tall black shadow. It didn't move. It didn't speak. It just stood there, staring at me. That same dream came again and again. Every night, the same room, the same shadow, the same heavy silence. I told Pallavi Didi about it, but she said, maybe it's happening because you keep thinking about it. So again, I tried to push it away. But one afternoon, things became much worse. I came back from class completely exhausted. I didn't even remove my shoes. I just dropped my bag near the bed and lay down. My roommate was in the library, and she usually returned around evening. I fell asleep almost immediately. And then I saw that same dream again. But this time, the shadow didn't just stand near my feet. It came closer. Slowly, it reached my bed. Then I felt something touch my leg, starting from my ankle and moving upward toward my thigh. I woke up instantly, and the worst part was, I could still feel that touch. It wasn't like a dream fading away. It felt physical, real, like someone had actually touched me. I got so scared that I ran out of the room and went straight to another friend's room. I stayed there until my roommate came back. After that day, I couldn't convince myself that the room was normal anymore. Then one night, I was awake on my phone. It was after 2 a.m. Pallavi Didi was asleep, and we had left the door slightly open for ventilation. Suddenly, I saw someone enter the room. It looked like a short figure, walking quietly inside. I froze. I thought maybe it was my roommate returning from the washroom. But the figure walked toward the mirror. And the moment it reached there, it disappeared into the darkness. My whole body went cold. I immediately looked at my roommate's bed. She was still sleeping. I called her name again and again until she woke up. I asked her, "Did you just go to the washroom?" She looked confused and said, "No, I didn't go anywhere." That was when my heart just dropped. I jumped out of bed, shut the door properly, and started reciting Ayat ul-Kursi out loud. I told her everything. That night, I couldn't sleep on my own bed, so I slept beside her. After all this, I went home and told my mother everything. Now, I don't really believe in movies and all of that, but my mother does. She was worried, so she said we should go meet one. We went to see a movie. He didn't ask many questions. He only asked my name and what had been happening to me. Then he sat quietly, closed his eyes, and started doing something strange, like touching the ground with his finger and whispering near his ear. After about 15 minutes, he opened his eyes and said, "Where you stay, There is a narrow lane nearby, and there is a mosque there, right? I was shocked, because yes, there was a mosque near my hostel. But he didn't know where I lived. He didn't even know I was staying in Lucknow. Then he said, "Someone near that mosque has done black magic on you. They sent a jinn to watch you. That person cannot come near you directly, so they sent it to follow you, scare you, and disturb your mind." I just sat there, frozen. He told me to pray more, to be regular with namaz, and to protect myself spiritually. He said someone had a very bad eye on me. Then he performed some rituals. He made me touch a few things, and then told me to stare at some sweets for almost an hour. After that, those things were taken away and thrown into a river. He said it was an offering, something meant to make the jinn leave me alone. He never told us who had done it, but before we left, he said one thing that still stays with me. He said, "Don't eat anything given by strangers. The person who did this likes you. They want to break your mind. That is why they sent it." After that day, everything slowly became normal again. The sleep paralysis stopped. The dreams stopped. The room felt like a room again. But that black shadow near my feet, I will never forget it. For a little bit of context, I honestly do believe I've always had some sort of spiritual sensitivity, even if it's only a quiet, small kind of thing. I get these strange gut feelings, and they're not always easy to explain. I remember knowing the last time I saw my granddad would be the last time. I have the same feeling with someone close to my partner's family too. Neither of them was unwell at the time, so there was no real reason for me to think that. But within a few weeks, both of them had passed away. I also had an incredibly vivid dream about my dad dying not long before it actually happened. It was so intense that I told a few of my friends about it because I couldn't shake it. Another time, I woke up in the middle of the night so suddenly that I startled my partner awake as well. The next day, I found out that around that exact time, my best friend's mother had died. And I've seen things too. I don't really know what else to call them except spirits. They look like real people for a second, usually out of the corner of my eye, and then they just disappear. But the worst of it happened when I was a teenager. I swear the house I lived in back then was haunted. I used to hear footsteps moving down the hallway beside my bedroom when nobody else was home. I constantly felt like I was being watched. One night, I was in the shower when this freezing cold breeze suddenly came over me. It was so cold that I got goosebumps everywhere, even though I was standing under really hot water and the whole bathroom was full of steam. I closed my eyes and stood directly under the water, trying to warm myself back up. Then I heard this huge bang. It sounded exactly like someone had slapped their hand hard against the shower glass. I opened my eyes, and there was a handprint on the screen. Clear as anything. Just one handprint. The fingers looked wrong somehow, like they were too short or strangely shaped compared to the palm. Then, almost immediately, my phone started ringing. It was an unknown number. I don't know why I answered it, especially standing there in the shower, but I did. I said, "Hello?" And all I heard was my own voice echoing back at me. "Hello. Hello. Hello." I jumped out, wrapped myself in a towel, and ran straight to my mom's room. I slept in her bed that night, which I hadn't done since I was little. Another night, I came home late and noticed my bedroom light was on. I knew I hadn't left it on. When I looked inside, I saw what looked like a little girl standing in my room. I completely froze. I ended up sitting outside in my car, too scared to go in. Then the little air freshener hanging from my rearview mirror suddenly started swinging violently. It was hitting the roof of the car and smacking against the windshield like something had grabbed it. Eventually, I forced myself to go inside. When I got to my room, the light was off, and nobody was there. At one point, a group of friends agreed to stay over because I'd told them what had been happening. The next morning, every single one of us woke up with random bruises. There were about 6 of us, and all of us had them. No one could explain it. Then there was the day I came home in the afternoon and was making food in the kitchen. I looked up and saw someone in a dark gray hoodie step backward behind the wall. I was absolutely terrified. The only reason I didn't call the police was because I'd already been dealing with so many strange things in that house, and part of me was scared I'd embarrass myself if nobody was really there. Instead, I messaged my mom and my best friend's parents and asked them to come over and check the house. I sat on the kitchen floor holding a knife until they arrived. They searched everywhere and found no one. My mom told me not to mention any of it to my sister because she spent a lot of time home alone and didn't want her frightened. But years after we moved out, my sister randomly told me that she used to see a man in a gray hoodie in that house too. I hadn't told her that part. For a while, I moved overseas to stay with relatives, and even there, strange things followed me. One night, I turned the lights off and was walking upstairs when I felt a hard shove into my shoulder. It pushed me straight into the wall, hard enough that it cracked the side of my cousin's laptop, which I was carrying at the time. I went into my room and left a lamp on because I was too scared to be in the dark. Then the lamp blew. At that point, I decided I was going to sleep in my cousin's room instead, but when I tried to leave, my bedroom door wouldn't open. It felt completely jammed. My cousin eventually came over, and the second he tried opening it from the outside, it opened perfectly. There wasn't one big dramatic moment where everything suddenly ended. It just slowly stopped happening. But I still think about it. I've told people over the years, and I always wonder if they think I'm making it up or that I'm crazy. Even my husband doesn't really believe in that sort of thing, so sometimes I wonder what people actually think when I tell them. But I know what happened. I know what I felt, and I know I wasn't the only one who saw something in that house. I want to tell you about something that happened on a Friday night, because even now, thinking back on it, there's this strange weight to the whole thing. My girlfriend Lena and I had grabbed something to eat, and afterward we headed back towards St. Augustine's School on 6th Avenue. We'd been there before, and we wanted to see if we could investigate again. But when we walked around the back, the whole place was fenced off. There were signs warning about 24-hour security cameras, so we decided not to push it. Instead, we started walking around the neighborhood, just seeing if anything else nearby had the same kind of energy. Almost right away, a black cat crossed in front of us. That caught our attention because the exact same thing had happened to us once before at the Copper Queen Hotel in Bisbee. And sure, you can call it superstition, but when you're already in that mindset, little things start to feel louder. We kept walking, and Lena noticed another cat slipping behind a big stone wall. Then a few houses down, I saw a large black cat stretched out on a porch. A little later, she pointed out a small gray kitten with dark stripes lying oddly in the grass. Something about that kitten really unsettled me. I couldn't tell if it was hurt or just watching us, but the way it stared felt almost too direct. I actually told Lena out loud that it was making me uncomfortable. Eventually, we came across a corner house for sale. Lena said she felt something around it, so we looked around the outside for a bit, but there were people passing by, and it didn't feel right to linger. After that, we found what looked like an abandoned shop and checked the back, but someone was already there, tucked away alone, so we left. Somehow, we ended up back near St. Augustine School. Since it was Friday night and close to the bar scene on 4th Avenue, there was a lot of noise and movement around us. It wasn't exactly peaceful, but the building still had that strange pull. This time, we had brought some new gear: a spirit box, an audio recorder, a couple of sensory balls, EMF readers, and Faraday bags to help cut down on radio interference. We started with the EMF readers. Lena wasn't getting much on hers, but I kept feeling something. The building looked the same, but somehow it didn't feel the same. It felt shifted, almost like it was wearing a different face. I had this strong sense that we were being watched, and that whatever was there was moving around us, just out of reach. The meters didn't show much, but I could feel it. A few people walked by while we were there. One woman who lived nearby stopped and told us she had passed that building many times and always got creepy feelings from it. That didn't exactly calm my nerves. Then we turned on the spirit box. We took turns asking questions. We asked if anything there remembered us from the last time, since we had said we would come back. At first, there wasn't much. Just static, fragments, nothing clear. Then we heard one word: leave. It was clear enough that both of us understood it. So we listened. We backed away respectfully and moved to the building next door, where we found a set of stairs tucked into a more private spot. We tried again there with the spirit box and EMF readers, but for a while, we barely got anything. Then Lena asked if the spirits felt safe around us. That was when the EMF reader jumped hard into orange and red. It didn't just flicker either. It stayed there for several seconds, long enough that both of us went quiet. Lena said gently, "We're not here to hurt you." And through the spirit box we heard, "Good." That changed the whole feeling of the session. Lena kept asking questions, and from what we could gather, there were several spirits around us. That was when we realized we were sitting outside what seemed to be an abandoned church. After a little more back and forth, the meter finally settled down. We thanked them, set our boundaries, and left. On the drive home, we wandered around a little, just enjoying the night and keeping an eye out for possible places to visit another time. But by then, Lena was already saying she felt exhausted. Not just tired, but drained, like communicating had taken something out of her. When we got home, our cat was not acting normal. Usually she comes right up to greet us, but when we walked in, she was sitting in the exact same spot where we had left her. Lena greeted her sweetly, and we sat down to talk through the night. Then Lena looked at her and said, "Why is she crouched like that? She looks scared." I brushed it off at first. I figured she was fine. Then our cat came over to me and started sniffing my legs. Not just a quick sniff either. She kept circling me, trying to burrow into my shorts, which is something she usually only does with blankets when she's cold. At first, we laughed because it seemed strange but harmless. Then she went to Lena. She sniffed her all over, for a long time. She tried more than once to push her way up Lena's pant legs. She circled her again and again, lightly touching her with her paws, like she was checking her for something. That was when the mood in the room changed. It stopped being funny. After that, the cat went into the laundry basket and investigated it, then jumped up onto the bedside table and stood there like she was keeping watch. Lena gave her treats, and we both fed her, trying to calm her down and reconnect with her. Eventually, she softened and went to her usual spot to curl up. But Lena still looked completely worn out. Then she told me something she hadn't mentioned earlier. She said that when we first got home, she had seen a dark mass in the bathroom, but she hadn't wanted to scare me. That was enough for me. I prayed, reset the boundaries in our home, and made it very clear that nothing was welcome there. Lena was shaken. I comforted her as best I could, and after a while she seemed a little better, though still on edge. Honestly, I was too. Later, when we were in bed, I asked her if all of this was becoming too much. She said no. She still enjoyed it. But we both agreed that if we keep doing this, we need to be more careful. We can't bring anything angry or heavy back with us. I reminded her of the energy we once felt in the boiler room at Jerome High School. that thick, intense feeling that told us not to push further. We agreed on that as our line. If we ever feel energy like that again, we don't challenge it. We walk away. I was driving home from my friend's place one night, and she lives about 45 minutes away from me. By the time this happened, I was probably 12 or 15 minutes from home. It was one of those back roads I know really well because I drive it every few days, and normally I know I have service there. That's important, because this wasn't some dead zone in the middle of nowhere. But that night, it was almost completely black outside. No street lights, no porch lights, nothing. I think there were maybe 1 or 2 houses set back from the road, but I honestly couldn't tell because everything was so dark. I'd been on the phone with my mom for maybe 20 minutes while I was driving. We were just talking like normal, and then I saw something in the road. It was a big red puddle. And I mean red. Not dark like oil, not brownish, not something I could easily brush off. My first thought was, that looks like blood. I slowed down a little, but not enough to really see what it was. It was around 10:30 at night, and the road was so dark that my headlights were the only thing giving me any kind of view. There was a lot of it too. Enough that I started worrying maybe an animal had been hit, or something worse had happened. So I decided to turn around and check, just to make sure. Nobody was on the road anyway. You barely see cars there even during the day. A little past the spot, I pulled into a driveway so I could turn around. The second I finished turning the car, the call with my mom dropped. It just said, "Call failed." I remember staring at the screen for a second, confused, because that didn't make sense. I had just been talking to her with no problem. So I started driving slowly back toward the red spot and tried calling her again. Call failed. I tried one more time. Call failed. Then, on the third try, right as the phone said, "Call failed" again, my car just stopped. Not stalled in a normal way. It just died. I looked down at the dashboard, and suddenly all these lights were on. Battery light, oil light, engine light, turn signal indicators. Before that moment, none of them had been on. The car had been driving perfectly fine. I tried starting it again, but it wouldn't start. So I put it in park and just sat there. And through the windshield, with my headlights still shining, I could see that red splash in the road right in front of me. I'm telling you, it did not look like oil. It looked like blood. And I couldn't see an animal anywhere. Nothing on the shoulder, nothing in the road, nothing nearby that explained it. At that point, I was really starting to get scared. I tried calling my mom again. Call failed. I tried calling my dad. Call failed. Then I called my friend, the one whose house I had just left. Her name is Lila, and somehow she picked up before it even fully rang. I said, "My calls to my mom aren't going through. Can you please call her and tell her to check my location? I'm having car trouble." She didn't even ask questions. She just hung up and called my mom for me. So I'm sitting there in this dead car on this pitch black road right in front of this strange red puddle, waiting for something to happen. My phone won't call my parents. My car won't start. My location should be working, but everything feels wrong. And the weirdest part is that Lila's call was the only one that worked. Then my mom called me. And the second I answered, my car turned on by itself. I didn't touch anything. I didn't turn the key again. It just started. The call came through, the dashboard lights went off, and the car was suddenly acting completely normal. I told my mom, "Never mind, the car's working now." But I was still shaking. I stayed on the phone with her while I pulled forward, turned around again, and headed home. She told me she was watching my location the whole time. We use Life 360, and usually when I'm on my phone, it updates pretty accurately. It even said it had updated just now. But she said my location stayed frozen at that exact spot until I got home. I still don't know what happened. I don't know what that red puddle was. I don't know why my calls failed, why my car died right there, why my friend's call worked, or why everything started working again the second my mom got through. Maybe it was electrical interference. Maybe it was some strange glitch. Maybe there's a normal explanation somewhere. But honestly, I've driven that road plenty of times, and nothing like that has ever happened before. I want to tell you about something that happened a few years ago when my ex, Rohan, and I were still in our early 20s. We'd planned a little staycation for ourselves, nothing extravagant, just a short escape from the city. I asked him to handle the hotel booking because I didn't want anything too obvious showing up in my payment history. At the time, I trusted him completely. We'd been together for over a year, and I honestly thought, he's got this. We met near the station in the afternoon and took a cab to the hotel. The whole ride, I never even asked for the name of the place or where exactly we were going. I just assumed he'd picked somewhere decent. But as the drive kept going, maybe 35-40 minutes, I started feeling uneasy. At first, I told myself it was just traffic, just the city dragging out the trip like it always does. Still, something about it felt off. By the time we got close, I noticed the surroundings had changed completely. The roads were quieter, there were barely any buildings around, and the hotel stood in this strangely isolated area with overgrown trees and almost no signs of life nearby. I remember stepping out of the cab and just staring at the place. It was huge, easily a 60-room property, maybe more, but it looked worn down and abandoned in a way that made my stomach tighten. It had this faded grandeur to it, like it had once tried very hard to be luxurious and then just stopped. Inside, there was this giant lobby with a chandelier and polished floors and all the usual dramatic hotel details. But it was unnervingly empty. No families, no tourists, no staff bustling around, no sound except the echo of footsteps and the low voices of a few other couples checking in. That was it. No one seemed to be leaving either. And even then, even with all the warning signs piling up, I kept trying to convince myself that I was overthinking. We got our room keys, and one of the staff members led us upstairs. As we walked down this long, dim corridor, it really hit me that this massive hotel was almost completely empty. Not quiet in a peaceful way, quiet in a way that makes you feel like you shouldn't be there at all. I could feel my chest tightening with every step. Then we got to the room. The second I walked in, something in me just recoiled. I can't explain it better than that. It was like every instinct I had was telling me to leave immediately. The room was drenched in this dark red decor that somehow made everything feel heavier. The bedsheets had marks on them, the carpet looked dirty, and there were cockroaches skittering around like they belonged there more than we did. I was already upset, but what made it worse was this connecting door to the next room. It was locked, but the gap around it was so wide that I could actually see movement on the other side, which meant they could probably see us too. I was furious with him at that point, but I was also embarrassed to say how scared I felt. I thought maybe he'd brush it off, maybe say I was being dramatic. So I stayed quiet. He told me to relax and went to take a shower. I lay down on the bed for a moment, trying to calm myself, eyes closed, facing away from the bathroom. And then, very clearly, I felt the mattress dip, like someone had climbed onto the bed beside me. I really thought it was him. I turned around and said his name, but no one was there. The room was empty. The shower was still running. When it finished, I was done pretending everything was fine. I was angry, tense, and completely on edge. He suggested going downstairs to get some food, But even while he was gone, I stayed near the door because I didn't feel safe anywhere else in that room. I also became convinced there were hidden cameras somewhere. I made him help me check everything when he came back, and I looked too, but we couldn't find anything. Still, I never stopped feeling watched. Finally, I said, as calmly as I could, that I wanted to leave. I didn't care if it was inconvenient or wasted money or made no sense to anyone else. I just wanted out. To his credit, he agreed. We booked a cab, packed our bags, and headed downstairs. I remember taking one last look around as we checked out, and the place still felt just as wrong as it had the moment we arrived. What made it worse was the way a couple of staff members glanced at each other and smirked while looking at us. It sent this final chill through me. The second we got into the cab and pulled away, I felt like I could breathe again. And when we finally reached the main road, with traffic and people and noise all around us, I felt this huge wave of relief. I didn't care where we went next. I was just grateful we had listened to that instinct and left. I have something in my life that I still cannot fully explain, and honestly, I have been carrying this question with me since I was a child. When I was around 8 or 9, I saw a photograph of a woman for the first time. The moment I looked at her, I felt something so immediate and so deep that it startled me. It was this overwhelming sense that I had known her forever. Not in an ordinary way either. It felt like love, like safety, like belonging. It was almost like recognizing someone my heart already knew, even though my mind had no explanation for it. As the years went by, that feeling did not fade. It actually grew stronger. I started feeling more and more connected to her, and the bond I felt was deeply motherly. It was warm, protective, familiar. Every time I saw her face, it felt like she had always been a part of my life somehow. A couple of years later, I came across that same photo online. This time, I decided to learn more about her. That is when I discovered something that shook me even more. She was from a completely different region of my country, far from where I grew up, and she had passed away about 4 months before I was born. She was somewhat well known in her area, which made it easy enough to find information about her. But the strange part is that no one in my family knows anything about her. No one around me ever talked about her. There was no family link, no shared history, nothing I could point to as a reason. And still, her presence always felt real to me. For years, I truly felt as though she was with me. I do not know how else to describe it except to say that I could sense her. It was as if she made sure I knew she was there. I am 20 now, and this has remained one of the biggest mysteries of my life. The connection I felt with her was never frightening. It was beautiful, pure, and full of tenderness. She was a stranger to the world around me, but to me, she never felt like one. Lately, though, something has changed. Since around 2025, it has been almost a year since I last felt that same strong presence. I do not sense her around the house the way I used to. Before, it always felt so clear, as though she wanted me to know she was near. Now there is only silence, and I find myself wondering why. Even now, I still love her. I still talk to her. I still tell her about my life, and sometimes I cry in front of her photo. The bond I feel has never really left me. If anything, the question has only grown larger with time. So I keep wondering, is it possible to feel such a strong connection, such deep love and belonging with someone you never met, someone who died before you were even born? I want to be clear that I had a happy childhood and loving parents, so this does not come from loneliness. That is why this has always felt even more mysterious to me. And as unbelievable as it may sound, a part of me still longs to reach her somehow. I still want answers. I still want to understand why this bond felt so real, so powerful, and so alive. Because maybe, if I could somehow connect with her, even just once, the biggest question mark in my life would finally make sense. Hi, my name is Isabel, and this is something I've carried with me for most of my life. It happened when I was about 10 years old, and even now, after all this time, I still can't explain it. I think that's part of why I need to tell it. Ever since that day, I've had this constant feeling that something is nearby, something quiet and patient, just watching. When I was a kid, my parents always told me to say a prayer before bed. They believed it protected you, kept nightmares away, that sort of thing. I usually listened, every night, without fail. But one evening, I just didn't do it. I wasn't upset or anything, I just didn't feel like it. So I went to sleep like that. That night, I had the strangest dream I've ever had. Back then, we lived on a private seaside estate where my parents worked. There was a huge house up on the hill, and we stayed in a smaller cottage farther down. Even as a child, I was sensitive to certain places. Some rooms felt normal, and others felt wrong. That property had a heaviness to it I never really got used to. In the dream, I was inside the main house, sitting on a big sofa in the front living room. Across from me were a couple of pale armchairs, and nearby there was this large revolving door that led into another part of the house. Close to the kitchen, there was a long table decorated like a party had been set up. Balloons, plates, little treats, everything. It was supposed to be my birthday. A bunch of women from my family were there, talking, laughing, fixing the decorations. The whole scene should have felt happy, but it didn't. I remember realizing I couldn't get up from the sofa. I was completely stuck there, just watching everyone move around me. Then, one by one, they all came over and said something like, "We'll be back in a minute." And they walked through the revolving door into the next room, leaving me by myself. The second I was alone, everything changed. I turned my head and noticed someone sitting in one of the armchairs. It was a man, or at least it looked like one. He was extremely tall, maybe well over 6 feet, with this unnaturally long frame. He had no face, not a blank face, not shadow covering his features. I mean, no face at all. His skin was completely dark, almost like it swallowed the light around it. He was dressed in a black suit with faint stripes, polished formal shoes, a deep burgundy tie, and a dark hat with a band that matched the tie. In one hand, he held a cane, and at the top of it was this green stone that caught my eye right away. He didn't move at first. He just sat there, slowly tilting his head from side to side. Then he stopped, and I knew he was looking straight at me. I couldn't move. I couldn't even shut my eyes. It felt like every part of my body had frozen. Then he stood up, but not like a normal person. His body bent awkwardly, like his bones were out of place, and he leaned on the cane as he came toward me. Every step looked unstable, like he might collapse, but he kept coming closer. When he finally reached out toward me, I forced my eyes shut, and then I felt this sudden rush of wind. When I opened my eyes again, the chair had slid back into place, and he was gone. A moment later, the women came back through the revolving door, laughing and chatting like nothing had happened, like I had imagined the whole thing. Then I woke up. I tried to brush it off. I was a kid, so I told myself it was just a bad dream. I went up to the big house like I usually did because I liked watching TV there during the day. I brought my dog with me and turned on the television in that same living room from the dream. I sat on the floor, right near the armchairs, and from the moment I sat down, I had that same feeling again. That awful feeling that somebody was in the room with me, even though I couldn't see anyone. After a while, I went back downstairs to grab some sweets and left my dog upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard a huge noise above me, like a heavy piece of furniture had been shoved or knocked over. I ran back up immediately. When I got there, I stopped cold. The revolving door was slightly open. One of the armchairs had been turned to face the sofa directly, exactly the way it had been in my dream. And my dog was standing there, barking at the chair like there was someone in it. I remember feeling this wave of panic go through my whole body. I went inside, shut the door, pushed the armchair back where it had been before, and sat down on the floor to wait for my parents. I didn't want to be alone, and I didn't want to leave that room either. I just stayed there, terrified. When my parents finally came home, I ran to them crying and told them everything. I can honestly say I was never quite the same after that. Even now, as an adult, I still sleep with the blanket wrapped tightly around me. I hate leaving my feet uncovered, and I hate having my head too exposed, because some part of me still feels like that figure could be there beside the bed, crouched down, watching in silence. That fear never fully left. If anything, it grew with me. And what stays with me most is not just the dream, or the chair, or even the way my dog reacted. It's the feeling that whatever I saw that night didn't begin and end there. Like it noticed me too. I still don't know what it was, and I still wonder whether anyone else has ever seen something like that. You know, a few years after I began working as a medium, I went to stay at a friend's home for several days, and almost as soon as I arrived, I started feeling unwell. It was strange. I felt drained, uneasy, and by the second day, I was already telling my wife, "Something about this house doesn't feel right. It's making me sick." My friend, who owned the house, told me that ever since we'd arrived, the electrical problems had been worse than usual. She said appliances in the house had always acted up from time to time, especially the media players. She'd already replaced several of them over the years. Naturally, that got us wondering whether something in the house was reacting to my presence. Not long after that, I started noticing what looked like a pale white haze near the kitchen ceiling. Whenever my friend was home, it seemed to grow stronger, almost like a soft cloud gathering above her. I couldn't ignore it. Then, night after night, I became aware of a young girl trying to speak to me. At first, I brushed it off as dreaming, but on the third night, I woke up with a name still clear in my mind: Michaela. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a dream at all. That evening, when my friend came home from work, I told her gently, "I think there's a young girl here in the house." We were standing in the living room talking about it, right near the television, when suddenly the volume blasted all the way up and the channels started changing wildly on their own. For a second, I honestly thought maybe the dog had rolled onto the remote. But no. We grabbed the remote and tried everything. Lower the volume, switch the TV off. Nothing worked. It just kept going. And I'll be honest with you, I started laughing. Not because it wasn't serious, but because I was completely fascinated. It really did seem like this little spirit was saying, "Pay attention to me." My friend, though, was far less entertained than I was. She gave me a look that said this was absolutely not the time for amusement. I told her, "Michaela is trying to get your attention." In the end, the only way to stop the noise was to pull the plug from the wall. Later on, I spoke with my guides and decided to reach out to the girl directly. That's not something I take lightly, because appearances can be deceptive in spirit work. Just because something presents itself as a child doesn't always mean that's what it truly is. But as I connected more deeply, I became convinced this really was a young girl who had died and somehow remained attached to the house. What I felt from her was not anger, not evil, not malice. She simply wanted to be noticed. She wanted the family to know she was there. Once I explained that to the homeowners, they began acknowledging her. They'd speak to her kindly, almost as though she were part of the household. And after that, things calmed down. A few years later, we visited the house again. My friend told me she hadn't had any major disturbances since then, but every morning before leaving for work, she still said hello to Michaela. She believed it helped, that it made the girl feel included somehow. That day, I had a strong feeling Michaela would make herself known again, and she did. I saw the white mist return. The dog suddenly began barking at a blank wall and refused to move away from it. No matter how much we tried to call him off, he stayed locked onto that one spot. Even when we put him outside, he went straight to the window so he could keep looking back in at the same area. After that, I asked a friend to join me in meditation. Together, we invited our guides to step in and help. As I felt Michaela's presence around us, I asked, "What do you need? How can we help you?" That was when I realized something deeper was wrong. She didn't seem to understand that she had died. She was holding on to that house as though it were still her home. At that point, I knew I was dealing with an earthbound spirit. I also sensed that the guides needed more energy in the room to help her move on, so I asked that some of the people present be used in that process. A moment later, two women in the kitchen, who had simply been chatting together, suddenly burst into laughter. At first it seemed ordinary, but it kept building and building until they were laughing uncontrollably, tears streaming down their faces. It wasn't unpleasant. In fact, it felt joyful, almost radiant. I chose not to interrupt it. As that energy rose, I felt the guides step closer. Then I became aware of them communicating with Michaela. In my experience, guides and helpers often work with souls who haven't fully crossed over, especially those who are confused or still attached to places in the physical world. Their role is to bring clarity, comfort, and the light needed for that soul to move on. And then I saw it. Michaela was gently led away. I can't tell you exactly where she went. I only know that after that day, she was never felt in the house again. The moment it was over, the laughter stopped just as suddenly as it had begun. The room changed. The energy lifted. The guides were gone, and so was the little girl's presence. That experience stayed with me because it reminded me of something important. People do not have the power to send spirits on by themselves. We live in the physical world. We don't fully understand the spirit world, and we certainly don't control it. Help can come through guides, through grace, through energies beyond us, but I would be very cautious of anyone who claims they alone can remove a spirit from a place. Sometimes, all a soul needs first is to be seen. You know, for years my dad kept insisting that strange little things would happen around our house. Nothing dramatic, just odd stuff. He'd leave a room and somehow the lights would be back on later. Sometimes the washing machine would start up when no one else was home. Little things like that. My sister used to say she'd hear footsteps moving through the house when she was there alone. My mom always had a more practical explanation. She'd remind us that my sister used to sleepwalk and mumble in her sleep, rambling about school, friends, random things that made no sense. And honestly, I was usually the skeptic in the family. I figured it was probably bad wiring, people misremembering things, or just the reality of living in a duplex where every sound travels more than you think. And the funny thing is, weird little moments like that seem to follow us from one house to another, especially in the last family home before my sister and I had fully moved out as adults. Still, I never really bought into any of it. Not completely anyway. Not until the last time I was ever in that house by myself. By then, my dad had already moved in with my stepmom, but he kept the old place for a while to finish renovations before selling it. Most of the time, it sat empty, though my sister or I would sometimes stay there if we were visiting from the city. That final visit for me was just supposed to be practical. I was there to grab the last few bins of my stuff. Old awards, yearbooks, childhood leftovers, the kind of things you never bother taking with you the first time you leave home. When I walked in, I could tell the power had gone out at some point. The microwave was flashing. The oven clock was flashing too. Both were stuck at 5:12. I remember noticing it, but not thinking much of it at first. Then I went upstairs and saw the little digital clock in the guest room doing the exact same thing. Same flashing time. That was when it started to feel a little strange, because usually those clocks reset differently once the power comes back. But this one was just frozen there too. And then I looked at the grandfather clock in the hallway. It had stopped at 5:12 as well. That was the moment I just stood there and laughed to myself a little, because it felt so weirdly specific. I texted my dad right away, mostly because I thought he'd enjoy the irony of me finally feeding into one of his stories. And his reply was basically, "Yeah, that happens all the time. Drives me nuts." So I packed up my things, brought everything back to my apartment downtown, and didn't think too much more about it. A few days later, I started going through the boxes. At the bottom of one of them, I found my old Darth Vader alarm clock, which honestly was still a great find. I hadn't used that thing in probably 20 years. It was in rough shape too. The screen was damaged enough that the numbers had kind of burned into it permanently, like that old calculator screen stain. I picked it up without really thinking, and then it hit me. The time ghosted into the display was 5:12, exactly the same as every clock in that empty house. And the part that really got me was that when I first pulled it out and looked at it, the actual time was only a few minutes off. Close enough that for a second it felt like everything had lined up just to make the moment land. Nothing like that has happened to me since. But that was the first time I seriously thought maybe my family hadn't been exaggerating all those years. Maybe there really was something we couldn't quite explain. And even now, my dad says little things still happen. Different house, different neighborhood, years later. Hey, I want to tell you about something that's been weighing on me ever since my family and I moved into this house a few weeks ago. I haven't even been here the whole time, really. Not long after we moved in, I spent nearly 2 weeks in the hospital dealing with some personal mental health stuff. So even saying I've lived here feels a little strange. And before I go any further, I need to say this clearly. I know how easy it is for people to dismiss stories like this. But some of what's happened to me wasn't just a dream. I've had moments while fully awake where things moved, doors shifted, and I even felt something touch me. I should probably mention one other detail too. Right before the move, I got a porcelain doll. I know people love attaching creepy meanings to dolls like that, but I never did anything ritualistic with it, never tried to cleanse it or anything like that. It was just a doll. The first dream happened the very first night I slept here. It started out as a mess of random scenes, packing boxes, arguing with family, getting help from people I barely recognized. But the house we were leaving in that dream wasn't any place I've ever seen. It was huge and confusing, like a maze, with this heavy feeling in every room. At one point, I was sitting in a bathtub in this dim little bathroom, and the whole place felt wrong. I remember thinking, very clearly, I need to get out of here. Then suddenly, we were arriving at the new house. I don't remember the drive, just the moment I walked in alone. In the dream, it looked exactly like the house I live in now, except it was filthy, abandoned looking, completely wrecked. And right in the middle of the kitchen floor was the severed head of a fox. Its body was laid out on the counter nearby. I panicked instantly, ran outside to tell my family, and then woke up. Even now, remembering it gives me this awful, ritualistic feeling I can't really explain. Another dream came not long after, and that one felt even more real. I was in my bedroom, in my actual bed, everything exactly the way it is in real life. Then I saw this dark figure standing right in front of me. I tried to move, but my whole body felt dead, like every limb had gone numb. A second later, there was this violent banging on the walls around me, so loud it felt like the room was shaking. I forced myself to move somehow, stumbling out of bed and trying to get to my parents' room. But I kept falling over, like my body wasn't listening to me. It felt like that struggle went on forever. When I finally reached their room, it was pitch black, and that same shadowy figure was standing over them while they slept. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. Then I woke up. The third dream was shorter, but somehow worse in a different way. I had fallen asleep on the couch. I woke up, but not really. I still couldn't move or speak. In the faint light, I saw who I thought was my dad standing nearby. At the time, I believed it was him, but later I realized the hair was all wrong. My dad's hair is mostly gray and brown, and this figure had dark black hair. I tried to move and rolled off the couch. The second I hit the floor, I woke up again in the exact same position, still frozen. It happened over and over, maybe 6 times, maybe more. I'd think I'd woken up, then realize I hadn't. It was one of the most unsettling things I've ever felt. But the dreams aren't the only reason I'm scared. The next thing happened while I was at my desk working. I heard this slow creaking sound behind me and turned around to see my bedroom door opening by itself, inch by inch. No one was there. I got up, shut it, and sat back down. But I remember feeling more irritated than scared in that moment, like whatever it was had crossed a line. The worst part happened one night when I was asleep. I was stuck in another one of those looping dreams, fighting to wake up, fighting to move, and then I felt something grab my foot and yank. Not brush against it, not tap it, yank it. I shot awake and grabbed my flashlight, hoping so badly one of my cats had done it. But both of them were on the other side of the room, curled up together. Since then, I've been sleeping with the light on. I know that might sound ridiculous, but honestly, it helps. And ever since I started doing that, the dreams and the strange moments haven't happened as often. Still, every now and then, one of those looping dreams comes back, and it leaves me shaken all over again. So that's what's been happening. I'm trying to stay grounded, trying to be honest with myself about what could have a rational explanation and what I just can't explain yet. But I won't lie to you, it's been exhausting. I'm tired, I'm tense all the time, and I feel like I'm always bracing for the next thing. I went down a rabbit hole recently about Gaurav Tiwari, and I'm not kidding, this story has been sitting with me ever since. If you haven't heard of him before, Gaurav was one of India's most recognized paranormal investigators. He founded the Indian Paranormal Society, and for years he traveled to supposedly haunted places, looked into strange cases, and tried to approach everything with a level head. What made him stand out was that he wasn't just chasing spooky stories for the thrill of it. He actually tried to bring logic and investigation into a world most people either fear or blindly believe in. And that's what makes what happened to him feel so unsettling. Because this wasn't a man who seemed easily shaken. He had spent years around stories of hauntings, spirits, fear, all of it. He had even debunked a lot of cases people thought were paranormal. But at one point, he reportedly told people close to him that something dark was affecting him. He said it felt heavy, like it was draining his energy and changing the way he felt. That wasn't just some dramatic line he threw out there. According to those around him, it was something he genuinely seemed disturbed by. Then, in 2016, he was found dead, under circumstances that left a lot of people deeply unsettled. The official conclusion pointed toward suicide, but for many people who followed his work, the story never felt fully settled. There was no clear explanation that gave people peace, no simple answer that made everything fall neatly into place. And because he had already spoken about feeling affected by some kind of negative force, that detail only made the whole thing harder to forget. Some people believe it was a tragic personal struggle, something internal that those around him may not have fully seen. And honestly, that is possible. Even the strongest people can carry battles no one else recognizes. But others look at his life, his work, and those comments he made before his death, and they wonder whether he came across something during his investigations that stayed with him in a way he couldn't explain. That's really why this story lingers. It lives in that strange space between psychology and the unknown, between what can be explained and what maybe can't. And whether you believe in the paranormal or not, it leaves you with a chilling question. Was this simply a heartbreaking human tragedy? Or did one of India's most famous ghost hunters come face to face with something he couldn't outrun? I still don't really know how to tell this story without sounding completely unhinged, but something happened to me last night that I can't shake. I got out of work late, later than I should have, and by the time I reached the station, the rain was coming down in sheets. I barely made the last train. I remember rushing through the doors and slipping into the very last carriage just as it pulled away. And right away, something felt strange. The whole carriage was empty. Not mostly empty, completely empty. No commuters, no one half asleep in the corner, no one staring at their phone. Just me. At first, I didn't think too much about it. I was worn out, honestly. I sat down by the window, listened to the rain hitting the glass, and I must have drifted off for a minute. Then I woke up, and suddenly, the carriage was full. Absolutely packed. Every seat was taken. People were standing in the aisle, shoulder to shoulder. But the part that really got to me was how quiet it was. No one was talking. No phones buzzing. No bags rustling. Nothing. Just silence. I remember blinking hard, rubbing my eyes, trying to wake myself up properly. And then, just like that, it was empty again. Completely, impossibly empty. That's when I noticed him. There was a man sitting across from me. I'm telling you, he had not been there before. He was just sitting there, still as stone, staring straight at me without blinking. Then he smiled. Not in a friendly way, not even in a normal way. And he said, very calmly, "After midnight, this carriage doesn't belong to the living." I actually gave this nervous little laugh, because what else do you do when someone says something like that? I figured he was trying to scare me, so I played along. I said, "Really? So what happened here?" He leaned in a little closer and said, "The night before last, someone died in this carriage." And I don't know why, even now, I cannot explain why I said what I said next. But I smiled back at him and said, "I know. It was me." The second those words left my mouth, I felt this awful drop in my stomach, like I'd answered something I was never supposed to answer. His expression changed immediately. That smile of his just disappeared. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. My hands were already shaking, but I picked it up anyway. And this voice, low and hollow and far too clear, said, "I didn't die the night before last." Then it said, "I died on that train 43 years ago." I went cold all over. I looked up from my phone, slowly, barely breathing. and the man sitting across from me was gone. Just gone. But I could feel it then, plain as anything. Someone standing right beside me, close enough to hear them breathe, close enough to know they were watching me. I haven't gone near that train since, but here's the part that stays with me, the part that makes my skin crawl every single night. Around the same time, without fail, my phone rings. Same unknown number, same voice, just waiting for me to answer. I swear this really happened. I'm not dressing it up or adding bits for effect. It's one of those things that stayed with me because I still can't explain it any other way. This started in December 2020 in West Yorkshire, England. I was 11 at the time, sitting in the living room playing Among Us, which basically had everyone hooked back then. I was on the sofa near the big front window, the one that looks out over our front garden and the road. I'd been playing for a while when I suddenly stopped. I honestly can't tell you why. Maybe I was bored. Maybe I just felt drawn to look up. But something made me put my phone down and glance outside. And that's when I saw him. There was a man walking along the path in front of our garden, and straight away he looked completely out of place. He was tall, probably around 6 foot, and dressed in this very old-fashioned way, like something from another century. He had on a dark top hat, a black 3-piece suit, a long coat, and shiny pointed shoes. In our area, seeing someone dressed like that would stick out instantly, so my attention locked onto him right away. What unsettled me most wasn't even the clothes. It was his face. His expression was flat, cold, almost blank, like he wasn't fully present. He didn't seem like a normal person just out walking. He moved slowly and calmly past the garden, then stopped for no reason I could understand. He turned and stared into our garden. Not just a quick glance either. He stood there for several seconds, looking around with this strange expression, almost like he was irritated or confused, as if something about the garden wasn't how it was supposed to be. That feeling hit me hard. I remember this chill running up my arms and into my scalp while I just sat there frozen, watching him. Then, all at once, he looked up. Straight at the living room window. Straight at me. The second our eyes met, I dropped behind the sofa. It was pure instinct. I stayed down there for a few seconds, barely breathing, then slowly lifted my head to look again. When I did, I saw him moving up the driveway at the side of our house. That terrified me even more, because the only people who ever really went up there were people who lived nearby, and I knew I'd never seen this man before. We'd already been living there close to a year by then, and he definitely wasn't someone from the street. I panicked and ran upstairs to my older brother, who was the only other person home. I told him what I'd seen. At first he laughed a bit and thought I was overreacting, but he could tell I was genuinely scared, so he believed me enough to come check. He grabbed the nearest heavy thing he could find, and we went slowly back downstairs together. We got to the kitchen by the back door, checked outside, and there was no one there. The door was locked. No sign of anyone. I was still badly shaken when my mom got home, so I told her everything too. She's never been completely sure what she believes when it comes to paranormal things, but when I described the man properly, her whole reaction changed. She got this worried look straight away. Our house was built in the 1800s, and she said that a man dressed like that would have fit the period perfectly. We ended up talking about how maybe he'd once lived there, and maybe the reason he looked so confused staring at the garden was because, to him, it wasn't his garden anymore. It had changed. Everything had changed. A few years later, around Christmas 2023, something happened that brought the whole thing back in the worst way. My mom was fascinated and asked to see it. The woman showed her this old black and white family photograph, and my mom called me over because she thought I'd find it interesting too. I looked at it casually at first, and then, the second my eyes landed on the man standing in the middle, I felt everything in me go cold. I knew that face. I just stood there staring because it was him, the same man I had seen outside our garden 3 years earlier. Same face, same presence, same horrible feeling. Only this time he was standing in a family photograph from the 1800s. I told my mom straight away, and even now I can still remember the feeling that went through me in that moment. It was like all those years collapsed into 1 second. That experience is the reason I believe there are things we can't explain. Before that, I wasn't sure. After that, I couldn't really doubt it anymore. And the strange part is, that wasn't the end of it. My family still talks about odd things happening in that house. Sounds, feelings, things people have seen out of the corner of their eye. I still live there, and the house has a dark history too. We've heard stories about harsh treatment, children being beaten, and other bad things that happened there long before we arrived. So when I tell this story, I mean it. This is the one that changed everything for me. The man I saw outside my garden in 2020, the man who looked lost and almost offended by what he was seeing, turned out to be in a photograph taken more than a century earlier. And I still don't have a normal explanation for that. So I want to tell you about something that still sits with me, and honestly, I have never been able to explain it in a way that makes it feel any less real. A while back, my mom and I went to visit family in western South Dakota during the summer. My grandmother lives way out near the Wyoming line, on this quiet ranch that is probably half an hour from the nearest little town. She's in her 70s and lives alone in a small house she had built several years ago. The house itself has a very open layout, which I think somehow made the whole experience worse. There's one main bedroom, a loft area above, and then the kitchen, dining space, and living room all sort of flow together into one big room. Off the laundry room, there's a back door that leads outside toward where the vehicles are parked. At night out there, it gets unbelievably dark. There are barely any lights around, and once the sun is down, the whole place feels cut off from everything. My mom and I were staying there for a few days, and one night, somewhere around 11:30 or maybe closer to midnight, my grandmother had already gone to bed. My mom was sitting on the couch in the middle of the room, and I was off to the side in a chair, just scrolling on my phone. Then out of nowhere, we heard the back door open. Not slam open, not rattle, just slowly open. My mom and I immediately looked at each other, and then toward the laundry room. We both went completely still. It sounded exactly like someone had just come into the house. A second later, we heard footsteps. They started in the laundry room and moved slowly forward, coming through the house along the natural path someone would take if they had just walked in from outside. The steps sounded heavy, like a big man walking with purpose. And mixed in with the footsteps, there was this faint sound of breathing. Deep, slow breathing. I remember feeling my whole body lock up. The footsteps kept coming until they stopped right beside the couch where my mom was sitting. And in that moment, neither of us said much. We just looked at each other with that same stunned expression, like we were both silently asking, "You heard that too, right?" After a few seconds, we got up and carefully walked toward the back door. We checked it, shut it completely, and made sure it was locked. I can't even tell you what I expected to find. I just knew we both heard something move through that house. I barely slept the rest of that night. What stuck with me almost as much as the sounds themselves was my mom's reaction. She was visibly shaken at first, and that was not normal for her. Later on, she tried to act like everything was fine, like maybe it was better not to give it any more attention, but I could tell it got to her. The next day, she went through the house and saged it. My mom and grandmother are both deeply religious, but we never told my grandmother what happened. I honestly don't think she would have really taken it in. Since then, I've stayed at that house alone a couple of times, and every time has felt deeply uncomfortable. I would sleep up in the loft with headphones on, and I even hung a blanket over the opening just so I wouldn't have to look down into the dark downstairs. Even then, there were moments when I thought I could hear faint voices below me. Nothing clear enough to make out, just enough to make my skin crawl. At this point, I won't stay there alone overnight anymore. I just won't. What has stayed with me most is that it wasn't just me. My mom heard it too, at the exact same time, step for step. And that wasn't the only place where I felt something I couldn't explain. In 2024, I spent about a month staying with family in Tuan Nam, Vietnam. While I was there, I lived fairly close to a river that locals spoke about like it had a dark presence around it. My girlfriend then, whose name was Lynn, lived across that river, and every time we crossed the bridge to get to her place, she would get visibly tense. You could see the fear rise in her face before we even got halfway over. I also spoke once with a woman who lived right along the riverbank. She knew a little English, enough for us to talk. She told me she would sometimes see things she couldn't explain, and she spoke about it with this calmness that honestly unsettled me even more, like she had simply accepted it as part of life there. She also said the river had been used during the war as a place where bodies were dumped. While I was there, I sometimes felt this heaviness whenever I got near the river or had to cross it. It wasn't something I could point to or prove. It was just this deep, sudden feeling of unease that seemed to come from nowhere and settle over everything. When I put those experiences together, the night at my grandmother's house and the feeling around that river, it has only made me believe more strongly that there are things in this world we do not fully understand. I really do think there is both good and bad in this world, and maybe that doesn't stop with people. Maybe there are good spirits too, and maybe there are bad ones. I can't prove any of that. I know that. But I do know what I heard that night, and I know my mom heard it too. And some experiences stay with you because, deep down, part of you knows they were real. I still think of myself as an atheist, honestly. I grew up between two very different worlds. One side of my family was deeply, intensely religious, very strict about one God and one truth. My mom, on the other hand, believed in whatever kind of spirituality made sense to her at that point in her life. So I was raised around a lot of belief, but none of it ever really became mine. That said, there was one house I lived in with my mom where some things happened that I still cannot explain. The moment that sticks with me most is actually a very small one, which almost makes it stranger. It feels silly every time I tell it. I was about 15, maybe 16, lying in bed in my room late at night, talking on the phone with my school counselor. My cat, Miso, was curled up on my chest while I talked. My bedroom door was shut. The window was shut, and the blinds were those thick wooden slat ones, heavy enough that they never moved unless someone actually touched them. In the middle of the conversation, the bottom left corner of the blinds suddenly snapped upward, like someone had grabbed it and thrown it. Not swayed, not trembled, not shifted a little. It flew up. And I know how that sounds. I know there is probably a neat, rational explanation people would want to offer. But before I could even process it, my cat bolted upright on my chest, arched her back, and hissed straight at that exact spot by the window. She reacted instantly, like she had seen something too. That part is what has stayed with me all these years. Not just what I saw, but that she saw something as well. As ridiculous as it sounds to be haunted by a moving blind, That moment made me feel less like I had imagined it. And it was not the only thing in that house. We had this old gramophone in the living room, and one day it started playing by itself while my mom and I were both there in the room. No one had touched it. It just came to life on its own. Another time, we came home and found footprints on the kitchen ceiling. Not on the floor leading somewhere, on the ceiling. Actual footprints, like someone had walked upside down across it. I still do not have words for that. Then there was the night I had a group of friends over. There were maybe 8 or 9 of us. We were teenagers doing exactly the kind of stupid thing teenagers do, sneaking drinks from my mom's liquor cabinet while she was at work. We were all in the kitchen grabbing food, laughing, being loud, and then we all walked together into the lounge. As we came in, we noticed a sheet hanging over the upstairs banister. That was strange immediately because none of us had gone upstairs. And then, right as we stepped into the room, the sheet dropped. At the same moment, the lights started flickering, and my cat came tearing into the room absolutely frantic, screeching, scrambling, practically launching herself at the walls. It was instant chaos. What I remember most is the silence. No one screamed. No one joked. We all just froze and sat there, completely quiet, like the whole room had gone cold. Then, one by one, everyone called their parents to come get them. I still remember the boys who had been acting fearless all night, suddenly running full speed up the driveway the second their rides arrived. I've had this strange feeling for as long as I can remember, like something was wrong with the very first house we lived in. My mom used to tell me that when I was a baby, I would constantly stare into the corners of her bedroom and cry for hours. Not just fussy baby crying, but proper, panicked screaming, like I was terrified of something no one else could see. She never understood it at first. Then one night, when she got up to make my bottle, she saw something in the room that frightened her badly enough that she decided we had to leave. And the weirdest part is, the moment we moved to a different house, I stopped crying completely. A few years later, when I was about 3, I was the total opposite of that scared little baby. I was chatty, full of energy, always running around and playing with my toys. But that was also when I had an imaginary friend. At least, that's what everyone called her. I named her Marie. I used to play with Marie all the time. Before nursery, after nursery, right before bed, she was always there. But the thing about Marie was, she never felt like the kind of imaginary friend people laugh about. She always wanted me to do naughty things, things I knew I shouldn't do. It carried on like that for nearly a year. Then one night, I woke up and saw all my toys scattered across the floor. My mom had tidied everything before I went to sleep, so I knew it wasn't right. I climbed out of bed, looked straight into the corner of my room, and started arguing with Marie. I kept shouting, "No, no, no, no," over and over again. My mom rushed in, and even when she came through the door, I didn't look at her. I just kept staring into that corner, yelling at something she couldn't see. After that, it became a nightly thing. I'd wake up, stand in the middle of the room, and shout "no" again and again into the darkness. Eventually, my mom had enough, and we moved house again. For a while, things calmed down. But when I was about 5 or 6, it started in a different way. My older brother and I had this friend who seemed to appear whenever we played together. This time, it was a boy. He'd tell us to do awful things to each other. One day, he kept urging my brother to push me down the stairs. My brother refused, shouting "no" again and again. Then somehow, I ended up falling anyway. Everyone blamed my brother, but he swore it wasn't him. After that, everything got worse for me. I started sleepwalking, talking in my sleep, and having these horrible nightmares that felt more real than dreams should. Nearly every night, I'd walk into my mom's room while I was asleep. She told me I would just stand beside her bed, staring at her with my eyes wide open. What scared her most was my right hand. It was always slightly cupped, like I was holding someone else's hand. The first time she properly noticed it, she woke up and saw me standing there in the dark, just watching her. She said the look on my face didn't feel like me at all. She got up, took me back to bed, and the moment she let go of me, I started screaming and crying. But it didn't stop there. It happened again the next night, and the next. Always the same. Me standing beside her bed, staring, one hand curled like someone invisible was standing there with me. My brother never had any of it. Whatever this was, it seemed focused on me. Eventually, my mom's boyfriend moved in. Before bed, she warned him about what I'd been doing, told him to sleep on the far side because I usually came to her side of the bed. He laughed it off and said she was being dramatic. So he slept in her usual place. He woke up confused, asked what was going on, and immediately turned over. The second he saw me, he screamed. Not just startled, but full-on terrified. My mom said he jumped so hard he nearly kicked me by accident. The second he shouted, I started screaming and crying too. The whole house woke up. My brother, from the other side of the house, was so frightened he wet the bed. And while my stepdad was sitting there trying to catch his breath, I looked at him and said, "You're making Frankie angry." The next morning, my mom sat me down and started asking questions. She wanted to know what Frankie looked like. I told her, as calmly as anything, "He's very big and he's very nice." That answer frightened her more than anything else, because by then she knew he wasn't nice at all. Not long after that, we moved out again, and from the day we left that house, the sleepwalking stopped. The nightmares faded. I never stood by her bed like that again. Even now, looking back, I can't explain any of it, but I still believe whatever kept finding me in those houses was real. And sometimes, I still wonder what my mom saw that first night, standing in the corner of her bedroom with my bottle in her hand. I used to spend part of my summers with my grandmother up in northern Idaho. She ran this wellness retreat out of her home, and as a kid, the place felt huge to me. It was beautiful, almost too beautiful, with tall ceilings, a big open living room, and a guest cottage out front with a sauna and a hot tub for the people staying there. My uncle, who was only about 9 years older than me and the youngest in the family, was living there then too, and that matters later. What I remember most at first wasn't seeing anything strange. It was just the feeling of the place. There was this hallway leading to my grandmother's bedroom suite that always felt wrong. It stayed dark no matter what time it was, and even when the light bulbs were replaced, the light would seem to fade and dull again almost right away. Every time I had to walk down that hall, I'd get this awful knot in my stomach. I'd hurry through it as fast as I could. Her bedroom itself usually felt fine, bright and peaceful even. It was just that hallway. I never wanted to linger there. Then things shifted from feeling eerie to something much harder to explain. My grandmother went through staff constantly, especially housekeepers. Almost no one stayed more than a week or two. And the strange part was, they all seemed to describe the same thing without being told anything beforehand. They'd see a man standing outside near a small pine tree in the yard, just beyond the big front window. The yard was wide open and flat until the tree line, so there was nowhere obvious for someone to hide or disappear. I remember one winter day, there was snow all over the ground, and I saw him too. He was standing there near that little pine, wearing jeans and what looked like a work shirt with a faded denim jacket. I asked the woman cleaning that day who he was. She had only been there a few days, and the second she looked out and saw him, she just went completely still. She stepped outside to check, and he was gone. No footprints in the snow. Nothing. That same woman ended up staying longer than anyone else, maybe around half a year, but even she eventually left. Later, my grandmother showed us photos she'd taken of him. You could clearly make out a person standing by that tree, except he didn't look fully solid. He looked human, but not entirely there. That image has stuck with me ever since. And it wasn't just the staff. Guests at the retreat would often leave early. They'd sign up for several weeks and then quietly check out halfway through. Nobody ever wanted to say too much, but you could tell they were unsettled. My uncle had the worst of it. His bedroom was upstairs on the far side of the house, and he said he heard footsteps on the stairs at night all the time, like someone slowly going up and down when no one else was awake. One night, he found the front door standing wide open, even though he'd been home alone. He wasn't the kind of person who got spooked easily, but that house genuinely rattled him. Whenever he had the chance, he'd stay with friends instead of sleeping there by himself. Years later, after my grandmother was gone, we were sorting through old family photos and boxes of keepsakes. Tucked into one old shoebox were the photos of that man again. That's the part that still gets me. My grandmother had sworn she burned those pictures years before, along with the negatives. She used to say that every time she got rid of them, they somehow turned back up a few years later. You know how sometimes a place gets into your head long before you understand why? Years ago, I was walking through Washington, D.C., and I passed this old building called Tivoli Gardens. It looked worn, quiet, almost as if it were holding its breath. I remember stopping for a second and thinking, one day, I'm going to live there. It was just one of those strange thoughts that comes out of nowhere, and I forgot about it for a long time. Then, nearly 20 years later, my life fell apart a little. I had just gotten out of an 8-year relationship, and our lease was ending, so I had to find somewhere new to live. In the middle of all that stress, that building came back to me so clearly, it was almost unsettling. I couldn't explain it, but I felt pulled toward it. Deep down, I was sure that was where I was supposed to go next. So I went to ask about an apartment, and to my surprise, they actually had openings. The woman at the front desk was incredibly kind. She showed me a few different layouts, and when I told her I wanted something small and quiet since I'd be living alone, she smiled and said she had just the place for me. Not long after that, I was approved. I signed the lease, and my new home was apartment 410 on the 4th floor. At first, I loved it. Truly. It felt like a fresh start, but only for a little while. A few weeks after I moved in, things started happening. Small things at first. Strange dreams that felt too vivid, too detailed, like I wasn't dreaming at all but stepping into someone else's memories. Then one night, around 3 in the morning, I got up to use the bathroom, and when I stepped out into the room, I saw him. A boy. He was standing perfectly still in the corner of the apartment, just watching me. He wore old-fashioned clothes, the kind that looked like they belonged in another century. He didn't look angry. He looked sad, deeply sad. His face was blank, but his eyes felt like they were asking for something he didn't know how to say. I froze. Then I ran back to bed, pulled the blanket over my head, and told myself I had to be dreaming. But honestly, I didn't believe that. After that night, the whole apartment changed for me. I always felt like someone was just behind me, barely out of sight. The air felt thick, like it wasn't really air at all. Some days my body would ache for no reason, as if I were carrying around a weight no one else could see. Then one night, I woke up to a voice calling my name. Ferdinand. It was my grandfather's voice. My grandfather had been dead for years, and somehow, half asleep and not even thinking, I answered him. I got up and checked everything. The hallway, the kitchen, the closet. Nothing was there. But the feeling that I wasn't alone was so strong that I couldn't settle down again. Not long after that, I started coming home from work and finding the apartment door unlocked, sometimes slightly open. I know how that sounds, but I was absolutely certain I had locked it before leaving, every single time. I tried more than once to talk to one of the cleaning staff in the building, but every time I brought it up, she'd find a reason to rush off. She never wanted to hear it. Then one day, as I was leaving, I saw the boy again. This time he was out in the hallway. I barely had a second to react before he ran straight toward the wall and disappeared into it, like the wall wasn't solid at all. I ran over there, of course. Nothing. Just silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The very first night, he slept in the large closet area, and the next morning, he looked shaken. Really shaken. He told me he'd had a horrible nightmare that a boy grabbed his arm and wouldn't let him wake up. The fear in his face was real. I could see it. But I still didn't tell him what I'd seen. At some point, I mentioned everything to another woman at the front desk. The minute I started describing it, all the color drained from her face. She told me another couple in the building had shared a story of their own. Similar feelings, similar fear, except they had seen a little girl instead. By then, the heaviness in that apartment had become part of my daily life. I was exhausted all the time, drained, depressed. I started wondering if I was losing my mind. That's the part that really gets to you, you know? Not just the fear, but the way it makes you question yourself. Eventually, my parents came to visit from Mexico, and I told them everything. Before they left, we prayed together in the apartment. And during that prayer, something came over me. This intense pain rose up in me, but it didn't feel like mine. That's the only way I know how to explain it. It felt borrowed, ancient. I started crying uncontrollably, like a little kid. I couldn't stop. Even now, I still don't fully understand what happened in that moment. After they left, things got worse. My anxiety got sharper. The dreams got stronger. The nights felt almost unbearable. Then a friend offered me a place to stay so we could split rent, and by that point, I was done. Completely done. I said yes. A few days before I moved out, I was standing in the kitchen making dinner when I felt someone pass directly behind me. Not imagined. Not a chill. I mean the full, unmistakable presence of a man. His size, his movement, the shift in the air as he walked past me. I spun around. No one. I opened the hallway door immediately. Nothing there. But the air still felt disturbed, like someone had just crossed the room. When I started getting rid of things before the move, I told the cleaning lady she could stop by if she wanted to take anything. She came, but she wouldn't step inside. She just stood there in the doorway. I told her about the man I had felt in the kitchen and described him as best I could. She went pale. Then she looked at me and asked me to forgive her. She said they had been told not to speak about what happened in that apartment, but since I was finally leaving, she was going to tell me the truth. The man I described, she said, was the young man who had lived there before me. He had diabetes, and he died alone in the apartment while his mother was out of town. They didn't find him for several days. She also told me his mother eventually had to leave because he wouldn't let her sleep, that he kept appearing to her, that she was terrified. And suddenly, everything made sense in the worst possible way. The last 2 nights I spent there, I didn't sleep at all. Before I closed the door to apartment 410 for the final time, I stood there quietly and said a prayer for him, for peace, for rest, for whatever part of him was still trapped there. And even now, almost 5 years later, certain noises still make me jump. And sometimes, late at night, I feel the faintest trace of that same presence, as if apartment 410 hasn't completely forgotten me. I got home one evening and the whole house was empty. Not just quiet, but that deep kind of empty where you can feel it in your chest the second you walk in. No voices, no footsteps, no one in the next room. When I was younger, weird little things used to happen whenever I was alone. Sometimes I'd hear someone softly say my name, like a whisper just out of reach. Other times, during sleep paralysis, I'd hear these faint mechanical noises, almost like gears turning somewhere nearby. I never really had an explanation for any of it, but I remember how unsettling it felt. That night, the second I stepped inside, I had that same feeling again, like I wasn't really by myself. So I did the only thing that made me feel a little safer. I went from room to room and turned on nearly every light in the house. The hallway, the kitchen, the bathrooms, the spare room. I wanted every corner bright, like maybe light itself could keep the fear from settling in. After that, I went into my room, crawled onto the bed, and put on a movie to calm down. I figured if I just stayed distracted long enough, the feeling would pass. At some point, I started drifting. You know that moment when you're trying not to fall asleep, and your head dips for a second before you catch yourself and wake right back up? That's what it felt like. Barely a moment, just a slip. But when I opened my eyes again, something had changed. The house was dark. Not one lamp or ceiling light was still on. Every single light I had switched on was off. For a second, I just sat there staring, trying to make sense of it, because I knew I had left the whole place lit up. I got up and started checking the switches one by one. And that's the part that still gets to me. They weren't just lights that had gone out. Every switch had been flipped down, like someone had walked through the house and turned them all off by hand. The only thing still glowing was the TV, and the movie I'd started, the one I know I'd only watched maybe 10 or 15 minutes of, was over. I've tried to explain it to myself 100 different ways. The most reasonable answer is that I must have sleepwalked and done it myself. But here's what makes it hard to believe. My name's Mara, and I've never sleepwalked before that night. Not once. And as far as I know, it's never happened again.